Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Unknown Draft League podcast, brought to you by Smeargle and Limevolt. I'm Smeargle, joined by Limevolt. How are you?
Hey man, I'm doing pretty well. Definitely looking forward to going over the matches this week. Of course, we are now in week 5, which means we are in the back half of the main season before we head into playoffs. A lot of the players have come really far. They've learned a lot about their teams, and I really can't wait to see how it ends up. Because a lot of players can start strong, some might stumble at the start, but in the end, it's about how you finish. And I think we're really going to see a lot of names that maybe they started strong at first and they ended up falling off, or maybe they started off with a couple fumbles but they managed to pick it back up. But seeing how people end up, it's always a fun time.
Absolutely. Everyone has pretty much become comfortable with their teams by this point, going into, as you said, the back half of this league. We are entering week 5, which
Hmm.
means we are going closer and closer to the eventual playoffs, which will be very interesting. And this week, we see some very fun battles. We see our scariest matchup yet coming later this episode. How about we hop right into this, Lime,
I see no reason not to.
with our first match being between Tartarus
The tar-
Tanamouse versus Inazuma Iron Hands.
the coaches of which being Unova and Robbie respectively. And speaking of the coaches, Robbie ended up bringing Urshifu, Screamtail, Vivillon, Braviary, Magnezone, and Inteleon.
With Unova bringing Garchomp, Sylveon, Sneasler, Talonflame, Pachirisu, and your favorite, Stantler.
Hey, you know what? I'm happy. I'm gonna spoil it now. Deer does not show up this set, so I'm grinning ear to ear.
Deer does not show up this set. But
Thank God.
throughout this match, without going a little bit into spoilers, we do see who does show up, and that is the Pachirisu. It
Yeah,
is
Pachirisu does really well this set.
it shows off a ton of what makes Pachirisu good, and that is natural bulk and very good support moves.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, it's as it's always said. Pachirisu is bulkier than you always expect it to be, and with it having the best redirecting move in the game, that being Follow Me, that's something that can never be underestimated. But enough trying, skirt around the details. Let's get into it. Game one, immediately, I just want to say Unova just cracks the game right open. Like many games start, with players like vying for position, trying to get their thing set up. Unova did not care. Unova just immediately put on so much pressure. Robbie had ended up leading with Inteleon and Vivillon, and Unova is able to KO both of them without anything happening. Robbie can't get up Tailwind, he can't put anything to sleep, nothing. Unova just immediately took control of the game there.
Yep. And with that, I believe he got an icy wind. The Italian got a single icy wind off first, which it really did
Mm-hmm.
not do anything as the Italian died. And what was in the back couldn't really capitalize with,
Yeah.
already having a 4-2 position by turn 2. The
Mm-hmm.
only damage he took was icy wind.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of the Pokemon in the back, one of them was Magnezone, and in a desperate effort for Robbie to try and regain some position, had Magnezone use Explosion. And then it didn't even do 40% to either of Unova's mons.
Yep, we do see Robbie in the chat thinking that it would do more and not really figuring out that it
Yeah.
doesn't really do a lot.
I mean, yeah, like Magnezone, it doesn't have the best attack stat ever, but if I recall correctly, these weren't even like resisted.
Nope.
It's just that Explosion just does. It's not what it once was. It losing the having defense. It's still a strong move. It's stronger than your average Z move, but it's lost a lot of its luster, so to speak.
The defense having aside, as you mentioned, Magnezone just does not have the highest attack stat.
Yeah.
And with Magnezone especially, it invests into its special attack. And maybe, I don't know if Robbie calced it or anything, but Explosion is really a last ditch effort, especially on a Magnezone. Magnezone, of course, doesn't have the greatest move pool, But
This is true.
Explosion being a move slotted in is a very interesting pick in of itself.
I mean, I don't think it's bad. You know, as we've said, Pachirisu is really good, and Magnezone doesn't really have a great way to hit it. So a way to not only potentially deal decent damage, but also get around the follow me by having a spread move and explosion. It makes sense in theory. It just didn't end up paying off. But you know, as you can probably guess, from there, Unova just was so far ahead in position that game one very decisively went their way.
Yep. I believe game one ended with like a 3-0, something like
It was something along those lines. Yeah, it was a very dominant first
it
win.
was so
And
dominant.
against Robbie, nonetheless, who is often considered to be one of, if not arguably, the best players in the league. To get the upper
Robbie
hand on him, it's not easy. Certainly not.
Robbie is one of our top seeded players at 3-2. Of course, there are other 3-2s, but being
Hmm.
one of those 3-2s is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, going into this week, there were, only so many people that were at, the very top, so to speak. Robbie was one of them, but losing that game one, I mean, at that point, you're one loss away from going, at that point, um, essentially what I'm trying to say is you're edging closer to the middle of the pack. If you lose week five, if you're like 3-1, you go 3-2. All of a sudden, it's a lot of pressure on you because that means you have to go the rest of the main season without dropping a game, or not dropping a game, but not dropping a set. Because if you do, you could still make playoffs, but it becomes a lot harder.
Yep. Immediately going, the 4-1 is in second seed, 3-2 is in sixth.
Hmm.
So
Exactly.
it
But yeah,
becomes
I mean,
immediately a lot harder.
yeah, and truthfully, that mental may have gotten to Robbie. That may have shaken him too much. Because I mean, going into game two, right away, we see a really aggressive play from him. Goes Terra Fairy on the Braviary. That was better alliteration than I thought it would be. Um, as well as trying to set up Trick Room with the Scream Tail. Unfortunately, the Braviary does just hit into the Garchomp's Protect. However, he does get up Trick Room while Unova tries to set up Tailwind, so he definitely does have the speed advantage there. So the gamble does sort of pay off.
I'll be honest, I always forget that Screamtail can learn Trick Room
Hmm.
because in VGC it always has some other Pokemon do it while it just supports.
Right, I mean, its support move pool is so deep. Like, this thing can do so much.
I
It's
forget
so
that it
fast.
itself can Trick Room.
Yeah, it's so fast. It has, screens. It has Encore. It has Thunderwave. It has Trick Room. It has anything you could ask for, pretty much.
Yep. Unfortunately, with this great positioning that Robbie is in, Yuno's team is just really bulky, and
Yeah.
Robbie lays in as much as he can, but Yuno's team just takes these hits.
Yeah, Unova was able to stall out Trick Room very well, but they were still inside Trick Room, I want to comment. Sylveon uses Terra Blast, which, mind you, it's not Terrored, but it is a normal type move. Which means that since it's coming from Sylveon, it is Pixelate boosted,
Pixelate.
it's Stab, it's all that. But even then, seeing a non-Terra Terra Blast hit into Magnezone, which normal or fairy, it still resist, and do 52%. Like I said, I know it's boosted by Stab and Pixelate, but it still feels so weird to see Terra Blast do that much without a Terra. It always feels like it's just a non-move when you haven't committed to Terra, but seeing it actually put in work is really funny.
Blast on Sylveon is a wondrous thing.
It's really cool. It essentially functions in a very similar way to Moonblast, but sacrifices a bit of power in exchange for potentially being able to switch its type. It's good. It's solid.
It's great. Um,
But yes, as was said, Unova was able to sell out Trick Room and does position himself very well with both Pachirisu and Garchomp on the field. Like, at that point, you have one of the strongest offensive threats you can ask for, and Pachirisu, which it seems we can't stop singing the praises of.
Pachirisu has just it is
It's
world
good.
champion Pachirisu for a
Yeah,
reason.
2014. Yep, yep. Is that a meteor? Yes, it is. Don't care. Um,
So, fun fact
regardless, yeah.
about Pachirisu, it's a little off topic,
Oh
but I was
boy.
watching a I heard that. I was watching a trading card game tournament, and Sagen Park was playing. This was Worlds. Sagen Park was playing in Worlds TCG. Even they
Mhm.
brought up the Pachirisu. It is just that famous.
I mean, at this point in time, Pachirisu may as well be considered the mascot of VGC.
It could. It is
Like
very well up there.
that's a term I've legitimately seen people start throwing around. Regardless, getting back on topic,
Yep.
Chomp was able to just pretty much tear through Robbie's team, and with Sylveon to clean up after it goes down, Unova was able to get a really strong 2-0 victory against Robbie of all people. And the thing that makes me happy is that it was a deerless 2-0 victory at that,
Yep. This we
showing
did.
that Unova understands that yes, the it's good, right? The Stantler has put in work, but its main thing doesn't work when the opponent knows it's coming and when they're really prepared for it. And at the very least, Unova had the decency to not try it on Robbie. He
To be
knew that
fair,
Robbie wasn't going to enable it.
okay. One of the huge things with the Stantler, especially since we don't see the Galarian Articuno in this composition, is Stantler was brought as an intimidator. I'm assuming primarily in
Hmm.
this position.
Right.
The only thing that it really intimidates properly is the Urshifu, which can crit. It can
Yeah.
maybe intimidate the Screamtail from using a Play Rough, maybe uninvested Play Rough, or barely invested. And then the other physical attacker, aside from Magnezone apparently, is the Braviary, which
Yeah. And as was said,
probably
Braviary is
Defiant.
the only thing that yeah, Braviary is probably defiant, and even then, even if it wasn't, it still isn't that impactful because it's usually just going to be a Tailwind bot. And yeah, as was said, Urshifu can crit through, and the rest of the team doesn't really matter. So it's clearly just not the matchup Stantler wanted, and th- thank God. It's a good Pokemon, I'll admit that, but people just kept letting it get away with things it shouldn't. And even if Robbie didn't win the set, I'm glad he at least put a stop to the deer. Thank you, Robbie. This will not go unforgotten. Anyways, yes.
I am looking real quick.
Hmm.
Where is his team? And
What are
the
you searching for?
it's- what was it? Robbie's team.
Hmm.
It does. I'm. I know you don't want to hear this as much, but the intimidate. It is reasonable to bring it. Looking it. Uh, he has, of
I
course, the.
honestly disagree. The only thing it really stops, like we said, can potentially be the Ceruledge because all the other physical attackers can kind of just bypass it. And even then, Ceruledge was very commonly seen using Clear Amulet in past weeks.
I mean, there is
So I think,
also the Brambleghast may have
oh,
been brought.
Bramble Gas doesn't count. Come on now.
The Quillfish Hisuian we've seen put in some. Not.
You're grasping at straws here. Come on.
it
This was not the week for Intimidate, and even if it did get brought for just in case, I'm glad Unova didn't actually send it into any of the matches because it's very clear that was the correct choice.
No, brought exactly what needed to bring, and for good reason with that 2-0 victory
Mhm.
going to the Tartarus Tandemaus.
Yes. And now, moving on to the next match so that we don't keep lingering on this, we do have the Bodacious Bulbasaurs, coached by Amelia, versus the Frostpunk Frostmoths, coached by Reckless Trico.
With Trico bringing Tornadus Incarnate, Arcanine Hisui, Azelf, Electrode Hisui, Alolan Muck, and Goodra.
And on the other end, we do have the Bodacious Bulbasaurs with Sneasler, Magnezone, Rillaboom, not Hisuian Quillfish, Overquill is what I meant to say, Slowking, and Orthworm.
Yep. And right away, we do see a pretty good play coming from Trico with the Arcanine on the field. It goes Terra Ghost almost immediately and avoids
Hmm.
a very powerful play rough coming from the Sneasler, being able to do large damage back to Amelia's team.
Right, right. I mean, Terra Ghost is solid. You always have to anticipate things like Fake Out, and it's just decent for that reason. However, the thing I actually want to comment on is Amelia's item choice on the Orthworm. More specifically, running Mental Herb on it to try and guarantee Shedtail going off, even in front of Tornadus and its taunt.
Yep. We do
That
see.
I honestly think is just really solid, all things considered.
Oh, it's wonderful. Earthworm doesn't exactly want a lot of items. It doesn't
Hmm.
vie for, or it doesn't compete with a lot of different Pokemon for specific items either. It wants to get whatever move off as well as Shed Tail being the important one. You see that
Hmm.
Trico has the Tornadus, you know that thing has Taunt, so you
Exactly.
run the Mental Herb. It doesn't really want
Yeah.
much else. What else would it want? Leftovers, Citrus maybe, which are not
Right.
bad items, of course,
Exactly.
but the Mental Herb,
Mhm.
it just works. So you
Yeah,
get
and I mean, Amelia's able to capitalize on it really well. I mean, she uses that to go into Rillaboom, right?
Mhm.
And that Rillaboom behind the sub goes for Terra Rock, which not only makes it so that the Bleakwind Storm is not able to break the sub, but it also lets Terra Blast from the Rillaboom actually Oko the Torn right after.
Yeah, that was actually really fun to see. Terra Rock
Hmm.
is not something you basically ever see unless it's something like Lycanroc that's trying to be super offensive. On
I mean,
a
Terra Rock is honestly solid. It has some really good resistances. It's just most metas don't really allow for it because of, things like that ground weakness and
oh, you
all.
can
But
most teams can cover for rock types really easily.
yeah, but
But
in
in
a
this
in a
case,
context like draft where teams are a lot more limited, it's honestly really solid and we've seen it work on a couple of teams now.
yep.
Terra Rock is not something to be underestimated. Rock is a really good offensive typing and it has some good defensive utility too.
And I do find it somewhat funny. I believe Amelia's Rillaboom has taken the Terra in almost every game we've seen from her.
Right, this thing has been very Terra hungry overall. This is true.
Yep. Um, but the game was really kind of back and forth. Trico tried to go
Oh,
for
absolutely.
the acid armor again on the Gudra,
Hmm.
which
And I
it
mean,
it helped
sorry, go ahead.
it helped a little bit, of course. Like it's of course a +2 defense boost, and the Gudra running body press, is it?
I believe so, yeah. But I mean, the acid armor itself was just set up really smartly because as
It
we've
was.
seen, yeah, Gudra and acid armor, it's clear that it's a good combo, but it's something that's been used very recklessly previously, right? But in this situation, it was used the turn that the Hisuian Arcanine went Terra Ghost in order to be immune to the Sneasler's close combat, and it was able to, just KO it in return, which gave Gudra the time it needed to set up that acid armor. But I mean, as you said, this game was super back and forth. I mean, immediately after that, Emilia with Overquill just goes for Swords Dance, as Rillaboom was able to live the +2 super effective body press from the Gudra, and just like it just the ball kept getting passed forward and back and back and forward.
Until this Overcool gets off a second Swords Dance.
I mean,
But
more than just the swords dance, I think the big thing was the poison jab that it went for.
of course,
As the poison jab it went for into Gudra actually did end up poisoning, which being able to counteract Amelia's grassy terrain, it was very helpful, is what I'll say.
yeah, giving your opponent's acid armor boosted Pokemon healing, maybe not the best. But even
Hmm.
when the terrain went down, that poison, it was, I think it was a combination of the Swords Dance and the poison. The poison, of
Sure,
course,
yeah.
being great, but without that Swords Dance, maybe not doing enough damage right away, giving Trico more turns to work with. That second Swords
Hmm.
Dance, it just put Overquill's power a little bit over what this Gudra could handle. On top of, I was the Rillaboom, I believe, next to it. The two, it just could not handle this 2v1 being poisoned, facing down in a +4 Overquill. It
Hmm.
just could not really. If Gudra ever got a recovery move, that'd be game over.
Yeah, I mean, as we saw, like the grassy terrain, it was able to be neutralized thanks to the poison jab, but it was still like really scary. And the passive recovery Gudra did get from it was it was it could have swung the match if that poison didn't happen. Like they needed the swords dance, they needed the poison, but it worked out. And speaking of the grassy terrain, we're saying it like it was only benefiting the Gudra, but it didn't. Overquill was able to take great advantage of it,
Oh, it
as
took
thanks to it,
massive.
thanks to the grassy terrain, Overquill was barely able to live two body presses and was able to KO the Gudra, which gave Amelia a nail biting victory as her team was on its last legs there.
Yeah, I said it was a 2v1, but this 2v1 could have gone so differently.
Oh, absolutely. It
It was
was
down to the
insanely close.
percentages.
Hmm.
Like a single Like if that terrain maybe went down a turn earlier and the Rillaboom got KO'd, then the Gudra could just turn around and start smacking the Overquill. Or
Yeah,
if the Rillaboom went down, just turn around and start smacking the Overquill. And it would
right.
probably would have taken that KO too.
Hmm.
Everything was just down to the percentages in this battle, and it was really close.
Right. But yeah, I mean, going into game two, it's clear that game one was very close, and Amelia may not have been too comfortable with that because she did try and switch it up a little bit. As immediately she just went for Terra with Slowking to just pretty much guarantee Trick Room would go up for her. But going back to the Gudra again, because Amelia's team was so hard set on just getting up that Trick Room, she wasn't actually applying that much pressure. So the Gudra was immediately able to just get up two Acid Armors.
Yeah, going
And
for turn one trick rooms, you tend to be a little more passive to ensure that you get this trick room up. Trico
Mhm.
just read into that perfectly. And I will say, over the course of this battle, with the terrain and everything happening, there was a ton of residual healing.
Very true. But yeah, I mean, after the Trick Room goes up, obviously the Gudra is putting on a lot of pressure, and Amelia wants to try and do something to take advantage of the Trick Room. So, Overquill and Magnezone do come in to try and take advantage of it, but by that point, most of the turns have already been spent, and she just isn't able to get that much value out of it.
Yeah, we do see that the body press on the Gudra actually got to do a lot more work this game.
Hmm.
And it was another, like, somewhat back and forth, but the damage just went straight to Amelia's side. And it
Yeah, there
just,
were some points where, Amelia tried to wrestle a bit, but Trico just was completely
yeah,
dominant this game. There's no better way to put it.
there were definitely turns that went maybe towards Amelia, but if only a couple go towards Amelia and the majority to Trico, it's just you lose out. And the end game came down to Alolan Muck versus Slowking, which
Hmm.
it just got so hard walled by the Muck.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of hard walled, the Gudra was just also able to last to the end, and with it being Terra Water, Amelia didn't have that many great ways to try and deal with it. I mean, in a last ditch effort, right? Like, Amelia is down really far. She needs something to help try and swing it back. So she just pretty much says fuck it and just goes for the Hail Mary Woodhammer into Gudra, hoping and praying that it wasn't Sap Sipper. But, I mean, it's Terra Water Gudra. Of course it was Sap Sipper.
And we did see the
Yeah.
Rillaboom use Explosion,
The what? The Rillaboom use explosion?
the Magnezone.
Yeah, there you go.
Rillaboom gets Explosion in Gen 9, didn't you know?
So true, so true. I mean, hey, apparently you got Heal Pulse, seeing what it did to the Gudra.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, game two, Amelia just had no way to out the Gudra, and she just didn't have any way of dealing with it after it got all of its buffs up. So, in the end, she just didn't have a way of breaking it. But that does lead us into game three. And again, Amelia has shown that she's been trying to adapt to this set, and she continued to adapt. It's clear that Amelia doesn't want to just let Gudra get away with whatever it wants. So right away, she just focuses it down. Sneasler and Overquill. The Overquill who was able to get a Swords Dance up thanks to the Orthworm Shed Tail.
Yep. Unfortunately, it was a great start off Amelia's end, but
Oh,
unfortunately,
definitely, yeah.
Trico just kind of played around it pretty well, and
Mm-hmm.
all of these boosts and everything, they just didn't do enough. They put in work. Don't get me wrong, but if you're going for such an offensive route and not being able to take like all four KOs immediately, it's just not going to go in your favor. You're committing so much, and if you're getting so little, then Trico is going to be able to bounce right back.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm.
Really, the thing that I think happened here was just the fact that, compared to previous weeks, this set, Amelia seemed less focused on trying to just accomplish her own game plan and wanted to play a lot more reactive, wanted to play a lot more, like counterplay type thing,
Yeah.
with how she like used her terras and how she tried to pivot around, but she just didn't have the tools she needed to deal with specific threats. And I mean, game two, it was the Gudra, and game three here, it was actually the Hisuian Arcanine. Now, I will say, Amelia did get a bit of bad luck from the Hisuian Electrode spreading around Perez. It did force her into a bad spot, but it
Oh, that
really
electrode put in some work as well.
it did. But yeah, the Terra ended up getting spent on Rillaboom pretty early, and once that happened, Amelia just had no answer to the Hisuian Arcanine. And I mean, Gudra and the Harcanine, they near enough soloed games 2 and 3 with how high of impact they had. With no reliable way to check these Pokemon, Trico ended up getting pretty clean games 2 and 3, which gave him the set.
Even I will say, even game one came down to such a nail biter. Don't
Oh
want to
yeah,
say
game one was so
I
close.
don't want to say that Amelia was almost like out of it from the start, but if game one was that close, and it really came down to Amelia getting like a couple turns super correctly, Trico
Hmm.
just I don't want to say outplayed, but their team was just better suited to like almost hard counter what Amelia was trying to do. Things like the Muck endgame, the Gudra being like Sap Sipper,
Hmm.
because obviously you're looking at Amelia's roster. Amelia has Rillaboom,
Right.
and
Yeah, and I mean,
Amelia's team is a. I won't say it's more It actually it is more physically of
mhm,
So the iron
inclined.
defense,
Yeah.
yeah, the I not the iron defense, the acid armor on the Gudra, it just went perfectly.
Yeah, and I mean overall, I think part of the things that went wrong for Amelia here was sort of just the comfort factor. Is as I'd mentioned, it felt like Amelia was playing a bit different to how she normally did. She was trying something a bit new, and while there's certainly nothing wrong with that, one does have to question a little bit why you would try so hard to experiment in the back half of the season. It may be that you're feeling comfortable with your team, so you wanted to try a new avenue. But if you're feeling comfortable with your team and it's working, most people would just try and ride that. And I mean, hey, who knows? It's possible that this experimentation will benefit Amelia later on, but
Maybe
I suppose
Amelia
that's something
was
we'll have to see.
maybe Amelia was trying to gear more towards Trico bringing something more defensive,
It's
or
also true, yeah. She might have just gotten the team wrong. That's entirely possible.
or maybe she was just trying to not try something different, but just try out something different aspects of her team that she just
Hmm.
never had the chance to before because of her opponent's teams.
Right.
So either way, the first game came really close, and this does show how good of a player Amelia is.
Oh yeah,
It
she was able to find her outs where they when they were there, and she was able to play to them. It's just those outs weren't always there for her.
Yeah, this entire the sets just really didn't go in her favor.
Hmm.
With this
But
being
yes.
a 2-1, the games went to the Frostpunk Frostmots for our second game of the week.
Hmm. And now
And
heading straight into the third, we
real
do
quick,
have. Hmm? Oh
uh,
yes, go ahead.
in the second game, I
Hmm.
forgot to even realize Trico didn't even reveal their fourth Pokemon.
Right, right. Yeah, game two was very dominant because of that Gudra.
I didn't even notice that until I was scrolling down. I just see that
Hmm.
game two had Arcanine in the back, and I just didn't even
Yep.
realize that game two was that fast.
Hmm. But
Going
yeah, moving on
into
from that, yes, we
going
do
into
have the. Hey, I'm the one who started it. I'm finishing it. You're not interrupting then taking it over. Next up, we do have the Wishing Well washing machines, coached by Jake,
Hey,
versus
you
the
got it.
Bellbog Basculins, coached by Olive. Yeah, I pulled up the document to make sure I got it right.
I was trying to save you, man, but you did it anyway.
Uh-huh. The Wishing Well washing machines ended up bringing Tornadus Incarnate, Basculegion, Dreadnought, Pyroar, Gudra, and Raichu.
With Olive bringing Murkrow, Arboliva, Rotom Heat, Iron Treads, Gengar, Coolfish, Hisui, and no Urshifu in sight.
Yep. I mean,
Was that the
Urshifu
play?
Burnout, I guess.
Do you think that was the play this week?
I truthfully, looking at the teams, I I get it. I understand. Urshifu legitimately doesn't actually look that good into this roster. And I think it was legitimately fair to not bring it.
I might disagree, but only because it's a Urshifu and
It
not.
is Urshifu, don't get me wrong. It's still really good. It's still really strong. And, it's Urshifu Rapid Strike, so it benefits from rain, but Jake has a lot of really solid resists into it and just things that can overall punish it for trying to do what it wants.
At the same time, things like close combat, I can see reasons to bring it, reasons to not bring it.
Right.
Olive,
I
of
I
course,
don't think it was an objective mistake to not bring it. I think one could argue that, but I don't think that it was outright a bad thing.
Olive, of course, did not bring it this week. And how did that go? We
Well, I
see
mean,
uh,
sorry.
game one, Olive doesn't need it. She gets two KOs pretty quickly after all, overall. And then
Mhm.
Murkrow goes for Perish Song and
Yeah, and I mean, slowing down
stalling it.
just a little bit. One thing I do want to comment on right away is both sides get up Tailwind, which was kind of expected. Gengar missed the KO on Dreadnought by 9% with Thunderbolt. So obviously already Jake's doing a pretty good job, doing their research, checking to make sure they're able to live things they need to. And they did go for a great play, trying to just immediately delete the Murkrow with Head Smash. But it missed.
Yep, Head Smash has the tendency to do
Yeah.
that sometimes.
Sorry, back to what you were saying. I just wanted to comment on that, is that the Murkrow realistically should have been deleted.
It should have been, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And game one, it was almost pretty convincingly towards Olive's favor. Of course, if you get that Perish Song and they only have two Pokemon left, you stall for 3 turns.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah. I mean, right off the bat, Olive was just able to put on really good pressure because of the Murkrow being able to live. The turn after, she was able to just go for Quash plus Dazzling Gleam to allow her to get rid of the Dreadnought. And then the following turn, Quash plus Shadow Ball to get rid of the Basculegion. And, it's like you said, from there you set up
It
Parasong, and it's
actually
checkmate
didn't.
at that point.
It actually did not finish off the Basculegion. It left it on just a sliver of HP. The Basculegion
Yes,
KO'd itself with either Life Orb or Wave Crash damage.
this is correct. It was Life Orb damage. But
Life Orb.
regardless of how it died, it did still die,
It did
which did
still die.
allow Olive to get the checkmate with Perish Song.
Yep. I bring that up because, of course, you are down a Pokemon going for the Perish endgame. It might get somewhat tricky, but it did not end up mattering. Just
Mm-hmm.
something slight. Game
Mm-hmm.
two, we see Jake going way more offensive. Wave Crash in the rain, doing absolute massive damage across the board.
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. What can be said? It did really well.
It's a
Um,
Wave Crash in rain off of
yeah.
Basculegion. There's not
Another thing
really.
I do want to call out is their Raichu. Is their Raichu put in pretty good work? The Raichu and the Gudra together ended up making a really good defensive team, as they were pretty much just able to wall a lot of what Olive tried to do. Like in game two, right? The Gengar tries to go for Dazzling Gleam against the Raichu and Gudra. And granted, it's not Terra Fairy, but even despite that, it does less than 25% to both.
Which is kind of insane, not gonna lie.
Yeah, like this is a Gengar. This thing's strong. And it can't even do anything to the Raichu, and it just gets nuzzled right afterwards.
Yep. Gengar has defined so much, and then it really didn't define much at all in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I
we,
mean,
that might just be Jake doing a lot more prep again, putting a ton of special defense into their Pokemon, knowing
mhm.
that Olive relies a lot more on the Gengar than the Urshifu.
Yeah.
Maybe just reading into that, making their team a lot more special. We did see the Basculegion surviving the Shadow Ball.
Right, right.
So maybe just a lot more focus on the Gengar, knowing that Olive just doesn't rely on the Urshifu as much, or puts so much onto the Gengar, and with the Iron Shreds and Rotom appearing just like maybe cleanup crew, really.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Gengar has sort of acted as the, I'm not going to say mascot of the Bellabog Basculins, but like it
It
has been
basically
their
has.
front runner. It has been their star player. And
If
so
it's
it's
not,
very clear that Jake saw that. We've hyped up Gengar in previous weeks, and it's clear that Jake listened.
if it's not the If it's not on the flag, it's the flag bearer.
Exactly.
It's
But yeah, I
just
mean, as was said, it was just really. Truthfully, there was solid play from both ends. Like Rotom Heat hits the field, so Jake, switches out Gudra and switches in Raichu to try and deal with. Sorry, yeah, switches in Raichu to have like the Thunderbolt stop thanks to Lightning Rod. Things like being able to see through defensive plays on Olive's end and just set up substitutes with things like Arboliva. Like both players were playing well this game. I don't want to discredit that, but Jake just kind of as soon as they got the ball, they ran with it.
we've been for the past 4 weeks, we've been talking about how directly offensive Olive's team is.
Hmm.
Olive didn't really go as offensive this week,
It's true.
and
Yeah, it was a lot more defensive, and Jake
Jake
kind of took advantage of that.
what definitely was the aggressor in all of these games. Game one maybe went a little away from Jake, but games two and the eventual three went so far into Jake's favor
Hmm.
with just direct offensive pressure. Let's not kid
Yeah,
ourselves,
I mean,
really. Wave Crash did
to,
real damage, and then in game three, there were no real like turning points or like bad turns. Really, it was just Jake putting out a ton more pressure than Olive could.
right. I mean, to paint a picture of how good and like how offensively threatening and scary Jake's team was, I'll give it to you and say that it was rain boosted, but Wave Crash from the Basque Legion did 70% to Terra Water Rotom Heat. It
It
KO'd it through resist after it took a bit of chip.
it was absolutely massive in this game.
Yeah. And now game three, I do want to say Olive did have a really clever idea. Trying to use Jake's own rain against him with Hisuian Quillfish and Swift Swim. She manages to do some decent things, but before long, she ends up having to switch into Gengar. And when that happens, it immediately just took 70% from a Bleak Storm. Like
Yeah,
it,
that
it, it
was
was
not a really.
arguably a yeah, it was arguably a bit of a greedy switch. You could definitely see the reasoning, but it didn't pan out.
It didn't. The Quillfish did. It's why I mentioned the Quillfish earlier. Actually, was little alluding to this game, but the Quillfish did put in a little bit of work for what a Quillfish
It
can
did,
do.
yeah. Hmm.
It is a Quillfish, of course, but Swift Swim did a little bit. Swift Swim rain boosted, but it's no Overquill and it is no um, Urshifu. It's a Quillfish. It did what Quillfish could do best.
Exactly.
It did its best, little guy,
Hmm.
but the
Yeah, I
best was
mean,
not good enough. And Jake does take this set 2-1 against the Bellabog Basculins.
yeah, and to linger on it for just a moment, one thing I do want to comment on, sort of similar to what we had seen with the last Gudra player, but the big thing about Jake using Gudra here was the acid armors. And we've critiqued it in the past. I have critiqued it in the past. But here, rather than just simply
Some good,
pressing
some
it
bad.
whenever, yeah, rather than just pressing it whenever, Jake was a lot smarter and a lot more patient with it, waiting for the right moments when Gudra wasn't being threatened to go for it, which ended up doing wonders. Good shit, man.
Hearing that
It
from
was good.
Lime,
It was
that's some good
solid.
shit.
But
Yep.
yes.
And
No.
going, anything else?
No. I was just going to lead into the next match, but it seems you beat me to the punch there.
Gotcha. Our next match is the Hyrule's Herdiers versus the the Kill
Kill
Team
Team King
King
Gambits.
Gambits, with Kill Team being coached by Nilly and Hyrule being coached by Link. And
Hmm.
Link, you failed me. He bring
Gulpin got brought.
Yeah, he brings Regieleki, Regidrago, Passimian, Corviknight, Umbreon, and Gulpin. Do we think
It's
that Link
nuts.
wanted to win this game?
I mean, real quick, let me go over Nilly's team. It was Iron Hands, it was Hydreigon, Delphox, Sableye, Bisharp, and Bruxish. And I mean, listen, more than just bringing it on the team rather than just having it on the roster, it
He
actually got
brought it.
brought. The Gulpin
It was
actually
lead.
got brought.
It was lead.
And it the worst thing is, it almost put in work. Like, the Corviknight sets up a Tailwind, the Sableye tries to knock off on the Gulpin, to get rid of, Eviolite, because there's no other Eviolite uses on the team, and as has been said before, it makes a lot of Pokemon surprisingly bulky.
I'm
But
sorry,
Gulpin actually...
it doesn't get
Hmm?
led. It gets you turned into him. My bad.
Yes, yes, yes. Regardless, though. The Sableye does try to knock off the Gulpin, to get rid of that Eviolite. But
Sticky
Sticky
hold.
Hold actually procs. I think that may be one of, if not the first times I have ever seen Sticky Hold proc in a doubles game.
I've
I
seen
mean,
it.
from there, the Gulpin tries to set up a couple Acid Armors, Steamroll, but it's no Gudra. The Delphox immediately just comes in and puts a stop to it.
Yep, I've seen sticky hold on a couple
Well,
gastrodons that have the wrong ability,
no,
but that
Sticky Hold is a genuinely good ability. It has
it
niches, just not
is.
in doubles.
No,
This is a story for another time, but I once revolutionized the entirety of Gen 8 Little Cup with Sticky Hold Shellos.
oh, speaking of gastrodon,
Yeah.
it's a good line to sticky hold
Regardless.
with, I guess.
Yeah. Regardless, yeah, moving on from
Yeah,
there.
it was just a wash on links, and there was nothing really that could have been done.
Yeah, Nilly goes for a really solid Terra, putting the Iron Hands to Fairy to be immune to Dragon Energy. The Regidrago goes for a questionable Terra, however, as it
Oh,
goes from Dragon type
water
into Water type. And don't get me wrong, Water's a great type, but going from Dragon type to Water type
in
in front
front
of
of an
Iron
Iron Hand.
Hands, yeah. And Link just really didn't have much damage outside of the Regidrago, so it being completely walled really hurts, and then also it consuming Terra on top of that, just game one was partially thrown away. I'm not going to say thrown away, but it was definitely put into Nilly's favor because of that.
There were like 99 to 1 odds. I'll be totally honest. Bringing Gulpin, Link, what were you doing, man?
I mean, I can listen. Who's Steve Jobs? That's all that needs to be said.
Link did not Gulpin these balls at all.
Ligma nuts. Anyways, game two. Right away, again, as I had mentioned, Regidrago was a lot of the damage that Link was able to try and do. So Nilly just immediately has Sableye set up Light Screen. Nilly then gets up Trick Room, is able to put on pressure thanks to Iron Hands and having, Drain Punch to keep it alive. And,
We
I mean, on
really,
Link's end, Link does get a +6 defense Corviknight,
yay.
but then because of Reflect, it only does 35% into Iron Hands.
Oh no.
And despite it having +6 defense, Delphox is a fire type and a special attacker, and it just
Special
flamethrowers
attacker.
and kills it.
Yeah, Link did not get early use out of the Regidrago, with, of course, it being the really, we've talked about this before, it is the primary offense on the team, and
Yeah,
not getting to use the Regidrago, it really did not get. Doesn't have a lot of defensive options outside of Umbreon can do something, Corviknight can do something, not against Nilly's team. Nilly just has so many options into
right.
both of those. Link,
I will say, Link does almost turn it around in the end. Towards the end game of game two, it was left between Regieleki and Delphox, and Regieleki does crit a Thunderbolt into Delphox, which
oh,
leaves it at
absolutely.
3%. However,
Yeah,
the Delphox is then able to OHKO it right back. So, realistically speaking, it was an actually close game. It just didn't feel close.
no, it would have been Link bailed by a crit, which, of course, that does win games.
Yeah,
It don't
where
feel
there's a rock
good.
slide, there's a way, you know?
You don't feel good winning like that.
Yeah. But yes,
Yep. And Link
partially
just
because of
bringing
Gulpin,
a
partially
five
because
Pokemon
of
team.
Steve Jobs. Yeah, Nilly got this game, and again, Nilly played really well. It's not that
Of course.
it's not that like Link completely threw Nilly. They saw their win cons. They played to him really well. It was solid, but
It was
yeah,
just these win cons were a lot easier to play to as well.
yeah, 2-0 victory for the Kill Team King Gambits.
Yep. Immediately moving on. We have the Dublin Blades versus Forsaken City Frogadiers, with the Frogadiers being coached by Hazel and the Blades being coached by Solosis, who brings Regieleki, Tornadus Therian, Decidueye Hisui, Pelipper, Overquill, and Sableye.
Yep, and then on the other end, we do see the Forsaken City Frogadiers bringing the Klefki, Chi-Yu, Lilligant, Sudowoodo, Greninja, and Alolan Muck.
I will say Sudowoodo, it's either faster or does a lot more damage than I expected.
It has to be. It does a lot more damage because that thing is slow. That thing's like Snorlax speed tier.
Then it does a lot more than I expected. But Hazel's Muck this week was the stuff of legends in game one.
Oh, definitely.
It was a definite defensive game from both sides, but I don't think that was by Cell's choice. This game was just Hazel brought like everything to slow the game down, which on a team that Hazel has, you don't think that's going to happen, but it
Right.
does. And this freaking I just noticed we don't see the Zoroa this week.
This is true.
We see a Sudowoodo instead.
Yeah.
Interesting pick, but this Muck, it just does so much work in game one, just not dying.
Yeah. And I mean, as was said, it was a very defensive game, and we see that in the turn one. Like, immediately, there was a double Terra on both ends, where Klefki goes for Terra Dark to try and be immune to Sableye's taunt, while the Tornadus T admittedly does go for an aggressive Terra. It tries to go into Terra Ground to Oko Chi with Terra Blast, but it just hits right into Protect. And with Light Screen going up right after for Cell side, and Hazel setting Sun up on her side, it was clear that both players were content to just try and, feed into what they were trying to do rather than advance the game.
They're just kind of going for the out damage kind of game.
Vaguely, I wouldn't even say out damage, just they were
Hazel,
both trying to set up their win cons without really trying to disrupt the other person much. They were both playing a bit passive.
yeah, actually, the more I think, the more you're right about this. Hazel set up the sun, of course, for her Chiyu. Cell set up the light screen for their team. It, yeah, neither one really disrupts exactly what the other team is doing,
Yeah.
but it's still Hazel's team and Sun does a absolute truckload.
Yeah. And I mean, it's true that both teams are still, while they may have been played a bit more defensively here, they are still scary, right? Like Lilligant tries to just raw switch in to take advantage of that sun that gets set up, and then just takes 87% on entry. But then before it dies, it just KOs Aleki as well as doing good damage to Sableye.
Yep,
Like once the teams were set up, they were ready to just start tossing nukes at each other.
yep. I do think Hazel's team, of course, the Lilligant did take a bunch of damage on the switch in. I do think Hazel set up maybe a turn earlier. And of course, the big thing about this series is taking care of the Sableye. And Sableye didn't really, it wasn't exactly as much of a menace in this game as it could have been. It got
I
up the
mean,
light screen. It did, of course, Sableye things. It just didn't get to stick around.
Yeah, and I mean,
Hazel,
in general, I just think Sableye isn't the best matchup into Hazel's team, as you have Klefki, which is usually going to be Terra Dark. Like, there are very few situations where it's not, if the opponent has a Prankster Pokemon. But then also, Hazel has 3 native Dark types on her team.
and
Prankster isn't able to do much in that scenario.
I do believe it was Hazel that was very afraid about Encore on the Chiyu.
Yes, yes. She did not want Chiyu to be encored into Protect, so she did run Mental Herb on the Chiyu, forgetting that it was immune to Prankster. That is something that did happen.
So this is effectively an almost effectively an itemless Chiyu,
Yes.
still doing that
It
much
still did
work.
great work, yeah.
Chiyu is still Chiyu.
Yeah. And I will say, alongside, everything that has been said, Klefki put in a lot of work, not just, for its supportive capabilities, but in this game, it actually takes 2 KOs, which then set up Chiyu in the spot it needed to be able to finish off game one.
Yep. And then game two is where this Sudowoodo comes into play.
Yeah. And I mean,
Uh,
before that, right? Like, right away, we saw game one be a bit passive. Game two, Hazel just immediately puts on pressure. As turn one, it's Sunny Day plus Sleep Powder to put Reggio Lecky out of commission.
though we do see Cell playing really smart this game, with a bit of U-turn pressure, a bit of switching
Mm.
pressure, making sure that Pelipper is in and the sun does not stay up. Rather, Cell was definitely playing for rain, and with the clef key being taken care of relatively early, the rain was the prevailing weather.
Yeah, Cell
Hazel did
was able
not.
to win the weather war.
Hazel did not care.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is that weather only does so much, and it only does so much in the face of Sudowoodo, which came in and double missed Rock Slide. I will say the luck does get evened out. After that, it is able to have Hisuian Decidueye get fully paralyzed and flinched for the next two turns. So again, the luck evens out. But man, missing a double Rock Slide always it just hurts, you know.
Yeah, we do see Hazel freak out just a little bit and then
But yeah,
freak out again in the other
right.
direction.
Yeah. But as was mentioned, the Pokemon that did get locked down from those rock slides was the Hisuian Decidueye, which was great for Hazel because that was pretty much all of the damage on Solosis' team.
Yep.
That was like the main offensive threat. And with it out of commission, Cell had just pretty much, lost most of their offense. Pelipper wasn't able to finish the game, and Hazel was able to actually get a fairly quick 2-0 victory.
Yep, this Decidueye was again a Terra Water. Cell is pretty comfortable with Terra Water Decidueye,
Hmm.
and it was a lot of the primary damage. With it being put out of commission, it couldn't do damage.
Yep,
It just kind of took some damage, stayed on the field, and if it's on the field, then nothing else can be on the field in
right.
that slot anyway. And well, it just did nothing.
Hmm. But yes,
uh,
going into the next game, we do have the Shanghai Shedinjas, coached by Ninja, versus the New Zealand Zekroms, coached by Jaggy.
with Jaggy bringing Gothitelle, Fluttermane, Dudunsparce, Grafaiai, Magneton, and Brute Bonnet.
And on Ninja side, we do have Tinkaton, Greninja, Rillaboom, Lycanroc, Gallade, and Scyther. And right away, we do see Greninja protect against a fake out, so, good solid read.
And this does proc
However,
Protean,
this does proc Protean, this is true. But Ninja tries to have Scyther set up Tailwind, which it is successful in, but not. You wish it wasn't. As Jaggy's Fluttermane just gets up Trick Room, causing the Tailwind to be a detriment to Ninja.
you don't always expect the Fluttermane to have Trick Room.
But you gotta expect it, especially when you see a team like the Dunsparce, Brute Bonnet, Magneton.
Yep, and with the Gothitelle and even the Grafaiai,
Yeah, it was a very slow team all around, so it makes sense for the Flutter to be carrying it.
which yeah, we have seen games previous weeks where the Fluttermane doesn't have Trick Room, and it's like instead it might punches a hole before or while Trick Room is getting set up, or
Hmm.
when Trick Room goes down, Fluttermane comes in. You have such a beat up team, and then a Fluttermane comes in. It's
Right, yeah,
been
using it
played,
in that cleaner role, yeah.
but it using Trick Room right away.
Yeah, Fluttermane being the one to use Trick Room is a little unorthodox, but I mean, hey, that's why it works. And when you have, such strong pressure, because it's inherently a ghost type, so it's immune to things like Fake Out, and then also you have like a Gothita, which is another Fake Out mon next to it to try and stop other, supportive moves, something like Taunt maybe. It's good, it's solid.
Yep,
But
and
with the Trick Room going up, Goth is able to live a double up, Dunsparce is able to safely switch in, and things are looking really good for Jaggy until a Rock Slide against Scyther misses,
yep, Ninja
which
does
really hurts.
the flinch or the miss aside, the Ninja does play pretty well under Trick Room. I will
Oh,
be,
this is true, yeah.
yeah, of course, you can always stall out the Trick Room. It is something that we see time and time again. The Trick Room going up and not doing as much as you might want it to. And of course, you either have to reset it or live with the fact that it didn't, you only took like maybe one KO, maybe put a bunch of damage out, but you didn't clean up the game in those 4 turns.
Yeah, but I mean, in this scenario, not even that happened, as thanks to Ninja's smart pivoting, they were able to escape Trick Room with minimal damage, and notably while still having four Pokemon, while Jaggy was down to three. And with Trick Room expiring, they just weren't in a great spot.
And I will say that Fluttermane is so physically frail. It was Terra
It is,
Steel.
yes. Uh
The
huh.
Tinkaton comes in and it uses Gigaton Hammer. And we'll say, like, Tinkaton being used in VGC even a little bit for Tinkaton Hammer and its support. Tinkaton Hammer, Gigaton
it
is, of course, a strong move. It did at least 60%, I think, to the Terra
did a lot of
Steel
damage, yeah.
Flutter Main.
It was resisted, but at the same time, you do have to remember, thanks to Stab, this is effectively a base, what, 240 power move? Even off a middling attack stat, that's going to be pretty decent.
Into a Flutter Main with 50/50 HP and defense.
Yeah, something like that.
Yep. It did a lot. And of course, you never want to see Flutter Mane go down, especially not like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you know, following that, an unlucky Icy Wind miss does allow Brute Bonnet to be able to put Tinkaton to sleep, though Ninja was still very much in the winning position after the Trick Room had expired. Um, Bonnet and Greninja die the following turn, Scyther sets up Tailwind for real, and thanks to a Terra Ground, Dunsparce's Rock Slides aren't actually doing that much.
Yeah,
And really, just Scyther in general was doing great. Like, the one Rock Slide miss against it definitely impacted it a lot. But once that happened, Scyther just put in work. It was doing good damage. It had the Tailwind. The Terra Ground was good. I genuinely believe Scyther was the real MVP of Game 1.
Scyther
He put
is
in a lot of work.
Scyther is definitely one of the most underrated Pokemon. It,
Oh,
of course,
absolutely.
it gets overshadowed, of course, by its evolution, but it still
Hmm.
has the same base stat total as a Scizor. Not only
Yes.
that, it's got pretty good like stab on its own. It's got a pretty good typing, even bug and flying.
Don't call Bug and Flying a good typing.
It's
Come on
decent.
now.
It's good offensive typing.
No.
Defense.
No,
The
it isn't. What are you
again
talking about?
against Jaggy's team. Against Jaggy's
I
team,
guess. I mean, Bug is good against their team. I don't see where the flying's putting in much work there.
and Poop on it. Which you want to hit
It's
with a
four
bug
times
move?
weak to Bug.
Acrobatics.
Bug moves are still going to do more damage. Whatever. That aside, yes, Scyther is still very solid. Going into game two, as Ninja did take game one, immediately we saw some unfortunate luck for Jaggy.
We do see.
Flutter gets up Trick Room. Greninja tears into Poison to resist Moonblast, which doesn't end up happening. But it just Ice Beams Brute Bonnet and freezes it.
Yep. We
Yeah.
love the rolling of the die, and it came up
It's not why
heads.
you yeah. It's not why you run Ice Beam, but when it happens, you just gotta kind of rub your hands and laugh
Make
maniacally.
you take advantage of getting that freeze and freeze on Brute
Yeah.
Bonnet. Ooh, you're feeling
Mm,
good.
yeah. I mean, Ninja was able to successfully stall out Trick Room and kill the Bonnet. And notably, I think Jaggy was very disheartened by it because they pretty much just wanted to kill the Tinkaton for whatever reason. But that thing was super bulky. It survived two attacks apiece from both Gothitelle and Fluttermane. And because of the momentum lost, both from the freeze on the Brute Bonnet and the four attacks launched into Tinkaton, which didn't even kill it, mind you, Ninja was able to just position well and decisively clean up the game, winning in a very simple 2-0 fashion.
Yeah, that could not have felt like a good set for Jaggy, but
Mm-hmm.
Pokemon is a game of luck. Even
Yep.
even in the game one, getting the rock slide miss, um, there were just a lot of things that went Ninja's way in this set. That I think that
Mm-hmm.
just sealed the deal. I'll be honest.
I agree.
Ninja just had a great set, and this was a 2-0.
It was, yes.
Yeah, 2-0, and it was luck induced, but it was pretty clean from Ninja. Of course, Luck can only go so far. Ninja played very well. Jaggy tried to play to their outs. Very interesting team. Trick Room on the, of course, Trick Room on the floater main. And then options the Dunsparce is
Yeah.
always an interesting pick every week. Their team looks pretty stable, not gonna lie. The Brute Bonnet, Magneton, Grafai, like there are definitely options. It just rolled
Yeah.
into Ninja's way.
hmm But that does lead us to our next match,
This
which
has our own
this is the
Frozen Limevolt
yep,
versus
coach of the Santa Maria Samurats versus Costa, coach of the Athens Victinis. My team was Annihilate, Armor Rouge, Sneasel, Rotom Wash, Fungus, and Klefki.
with Costa bringing Colossal, Azumarill, Morgrem, Annihilate, Rotom-Mow, Vivian. And before I hand it over to you, we have our first Annihilate mirror match.
Yes, and also the only Annihilate mirror match. There's
Uh,
only two Annihilates.
you might see each other in playoffs. You never know.
Our only one as of now. The only one possible in the main season. It's not like there's four of
Yeah.
them running around like with the Urshifus.
Only one in the main season. And
Yes.
Lime, the floor is yours.
Okay, so to give a little context for my game plan, right away I knew that if Coaster was able to get a strong speed advantage, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. So I wanted to prevent Tailwind going up at all costs. I had Sneasel fake out the Vivillon to break Focus Sash, which I didn't even know it had. I just had to kind of assume. But since both Shield Dust and or Covert Cloak could be on the table, I wasn't confident of the flinch happening. So I had my I had my Choice Scarf Annihilate after fake outing the Vivillon, click Final Gambit into the Vivillon to make certain that thing was dead. If I hadn't faked out it, I would have risked Focus Sash, and had I not Final Gambited, I would have risked Shield Dust or Covert Cloak. So it was a big investment, but I genuinely believe it was worth it. Sneasel was also able to deliver the Leaf Storm from their Rotom thanks to its own Focus Sash. Now, Morgrim comes out after alongside my Armor Rouge, and my Armor Rouge is able to get weak armor up before it gets paralyzed. Costa's Annihilate comes in and clicks Bulk Up as my Armor Rouge gets fully parried, and I have my own Rotom Hydro Pump into the Morgrim for 65%, which notably confirmed Eviolite on it. Uh, I try and Terragrass my Armor Rouge to live the double up, which is successful, and I am able to switch Sneasel back in. And the big thing here is that Annihilate, while it misses out on the KO, it does do 90% into the Annihilate. And thanks to a second weak armor proc from the Morgrim trying to hit into it, despite it being paralyzed, it is now faster than everything on Costa's team. Um, the Volt Switch. Sorry, so the reason I Terragrassed on the Armorers was to live Rage Fist and Volt Switch. Rage Fist wouldn't be super effective anymore, and Volt Switch would, of course, be resisted. The Volt Switch does bring Morgrim in. However, since I was able to confirm Eviolite with the Hydro Pump damage, Sneasel was able to safely just fake it out as Armor Rouge KO'd both of Costa's Pokemon with Heat Wave before finishing the Rotom Mow with Armor Cannon, giving me game one. God, I love Armor Rouge. I've mainly been using it as Trick Room so far, but the weak armor set is so much fun.
So,
So much
question
fun, in
Lime.
fact. Yeah, go ahead.
The Annihilate,
hmm
would Rock Slide have not been Choice Scarf Rock Slide not have been sufficient on the Vivian?
Yes and no. One issue is that I just wasn't able to fit Rock Slide because there were four other moves that I wanted more. Also, where there's a Rock Slide, there's a way, but it still only has 90% accuracy. I did not want to risk that, I'll be entirely honest.
That's fair. That's what I was leaning into, just not wanting to risk the miss.
Right, I didn't
But
want to risk the miss, but also I just had four moves that I cared about more.
okay.
Which, to be fair, they were all able to put in very good work. But going
Game
off the
two.
Annihilate for a second, yeah, going into game two, I decided to just outright lead the Armor Rouge and Sneasel. Turn one, I protect the Armor Rouge to avoid fake out, as Sneasel, who has inner focus, so it's immune to fake out flinch, could just simply foul play the Annihilate. It does get a crit, and it does get 66% on it, but the Annihilate does get a bulk up. And I truthfully don't believe that it mattered much. Now, following that, I go Terragrass with the Armor Rouge and Ice Shard into it to activate Weak Armor and Weakness Policy. However, it gets T-waved and it gets fully parried. Again. I realize now that I may have neglected to mention it, but Armarouge did get fully parried in game one, which cost me a lot of momentum. Regardless of that, it gets fully parried again, which especially sucked since Vivillon came in, and had I clicked Heat Wave, I could have just gotten a double KO on Costa, and from there just swept the entire game with it. Regardless, the Vivillon reveals that it was not Focus Sash, but it was actually Choice Scarf. I just didn't know because game one, I had my own Scarf Annihilate Final Gambited, and it was naturally faster. But yes, I was able to confirm Scarf as it puts Sneasel to sleep before the Armarouge just simply kills it and does 68% to Morgrim. However,
Yeah, I don't think it was Focus Sash.
yes, it was not Focus Sash. It was the Scarf.
What a way
Regardless,
to find out.
yeah, the Costa does make a mistake, as Armarouge was a little low. It was at, I think, about half health, and it did have a defense drop from weak armor. So the Morgrim tries to just simply foul play into it for damage. However, this just triggers weak armor again, which, similar to game one, gives Armarouge the speed advantage despite being parried again. And again, from here, I could have just won the game outright. But Armarouge gets another full para, letting Morgrim and Rotom Mo both live as Armarouge dies. At the very least, I was able to taunt the Morgrim as I bring on my own Annihilate. And now, from here, Costa does make a genuinely really good play. His Annihilate is low, and my Ape has been confirmed into Scarf. So he tries to Terra Normal his Annihilate to bait a Rage Fist. However, I did fear this, so I instead chose to U-turn on the Annihilate into their Morgrim slot, which allowed me to pivot into my Wash Tom and taunt the Annihilate to prevent Protect as well as any potential future bulk ups. Sneasel dies, I bring in Annihilate, and it's now able to just KO Costa's Annihilate. And from there, we just sort of trade kills. You know, his Rotom kills my Rotom, and my Annihilate is left very, very low. His Rotom is left at 1%, which I presume was a roll to kill, but I'm not entirely sure. The numbers were a bit wonky. But at the very least, my luck with the full pairs was made up for. Leaf Storm misses my Annihilate, which does allow me to clean the game with it. I win 2-0 in what, truth be told, game 2 was an actual nail biter. I obviously am very biased, but I very easily could have lost that game with all that happened. I mean,
You really could have.
the only Pokemon left on the field as the match ended was Annihilate at 6%, paralyzed, and with -3 defense and special defense because of all the close combats it was clicking.
Yeah.
Like, yes, had I not get the pairs earlier in the game, it would have just been a very clean and simple sweep. But had I not gotten that Leaf Storm miss at the very end, I could have just lost, and then game 3 would have happened, and there's no way to know how that would have gone from there. I believe I still could have won, but that's obviously a very biased take.
I feel like you could have won. You gained a lot of knowledge in games 1 and 2. You could have
Mm-hmm.
very quickly and easily figured out how to work around those, and maybe trying to disable the Morgrim a little sooner with taunts.
Mm-hmm.
The Morgrim was pretty huge in this matchup.
Yes, Morgrim did put in a lot of work.
I think Morgrim put in the most work across both games, getting a number of
I
paralysis
can see
off.
that, yeah.
It
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah,
a
the
very
Morgrim
good
Thunderwave
supportive
was
option.
really obnoxious, yeah.
Uh, of course, they had their own offensive options, the Rotom and the Annihilate. You played around those two pretty cleanly, I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
There were, of course, turns where
Right,
theirs
right.
outsped yours or whatever,
Mm-hmm. But
but
yeah,
we see an Annihilate beat another Annihilate, and Rotom Wash is superior over Rotom Storm.
I
Or
don't know what
Mo.
Rotom Storm is, but I know what Rotom Mo is, and yeah, it did lose the week. But I mean, hey, at the end of the day, Costa, we can both shake hands. You played great. I'm glad the other ape player is pretty cool, and hey, what can I say? We both lost to 9.
Where
We're
is...
Annihilate players, and we lost to 9. What more can be said?
A lot of people will lose to 9.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where
Regardless, though, yeah.
Costa is at 3-2, so really
Yes, we were
pretty
we
good in
were
the
both
runnings.
right. Yeah, we were both 3-1 going into this week. And of course, I end up as 4-1 while he was ended as 3-2. Still very possible for him to make playoffs, and as you mentioned, it's possible we may end up seeing the run back. Who knows?
Yep. Again, everyone at 3-2 still has a chance. It is,
Everyone
of
at three
course,
and two, yeah, has a really good chance.
yep,
The
it is, of
people who
course, a
are
lot
currently
harder.
2-3 still have a chance. Is the thing. Because the
If
way the math works out, there's going to be some X3 that's likely going to make it. So just because you've already lost 3 times doesn't necessarily mean you're out of it. It's still possible. If you lost the first 3 weeks and then just went 5-0 for the rest of them, I mean, I don't know how resistances work out, but it's not impossible for you to just make playoffs.
you just have to beat 9.
I mean, that's a tall order.
If anyone beats 9, the resistance will be so high.
Yes, very true. Regardless, yeah. Costa played very well. He had some cool prep. There was some fun ideas. I really was not expecting the Scarf of Milan, but I did end up taking the set in a 2-0 fashion.
Yep. The Terra Normal is actually one of the cool things I think that came out.
Yeah, Terra
Knowing,
Normal was really good, and it was a very smart play from him, and genuinely, I think most people would have played into it.
yep,
It was good. That was a potentially game swinging turn. If he had gotten that right, I may have just lost outright.
yep. Going into our next week, we have the Stockholm Sprigattitos versus the Giddy Goomies. The Giddy Goomies being coached by Fro, and the Sprigattitos by Kemmels, with Fro
Mm-hmm.
bringing Oricorio, Coqueval, Lilligant, Flamingo, Rotom Heat, and Thunderous.
And then on the other side, we do have Kemmel, who did bring Pelipper, Basculegion, Landorus Therian, Shroomish, Dreadnought, and Arboliva.
I want to hear
And
your opinions on this game because I do have a secret that I want to reveal.
sure. Uh, this was a this was something that I had mentioned in the Discord. Is that this? I think very well may be the record for the shortest notes I have on any set because wow, it was quick and it was dominant. So rather than trying to go super into detail, I'm just going to read off my notes here. Game 1. Kemmel leads Pelipper Dreadnought. Fro uses Thunderous to take control of weather, but Kemmel Terragrasses Dreadnought to be immune to Lilligant's Sleep Powder and gets Shell Smash off thanks to it. It then crits the Thundy for the Yoko while the Pelipper resets Rain. Dreadnought cleans.
Yeah. Uh,
That was all I wrote for game 1. Dreadnought just ran away with this game.
yeah. I will say game 2 was also a loss from Fro. This entire set lasted 7 turns.
Yeah, in fact, here, let me go ahead and read my notes for game 2 as well. Kemmel tries to repeat game 1, tearing the Dreadnought, but it gets stopped by Oricorio's Hurricane for the one-shot. Lilligant, however, gets flinched by Rock Slide before Pelipper KOs it with its own Hurricane. Both trade KOs, with 2 mons left on both ends. Thunderous goes for Swagger to try and boost Flamigo, but Basculegion and Landorus just kill them, giving a super fast 2-0.
Yep. And the secret is that I was trying to help Fro with team building.
Oh, Fro, you poor soul, you didn't deserve this then. I'm
So
so sorry.
no, we actually had a really decent team building session, but I didn't get to spend time. We only thought about like the six to bring and like very specific strategies, but not like I didn't get to help with EVs, items, or move sets. So I didn't get to help really with a ton of the prep, and I will apologize to Fro on that end.
Yeah, you better apologize. You're the reason they lost.
No, shut.
Yes. Fro, I'm
No.
so sorry that this week was thrown because of this gremlin's interference.
Uh, I'm going to ignore that because I was actually not, I was doing the exact opposite of everything that I wanted to do.
I am, of course, just joking around.
Yep. So
Yeah.
things like the swagger to boost the flamingo, that was something that I thought of because I was looking at the team. The Kemmel did, of course, just that turn one played really just
Yeah, I
The
mean,
Shell
as we
Smash.
have mentioned, yeah, as we have mentioned, Fro's team usually takes time to get the engine running, and Kemmel just ran like pretty much hyper offense here. Like Kemmel just went 0 to 100 in an instant, pretty much.
I I will say if Fro did like anything different, maybe a Thunderwave Protect turn, it could have
Hmm.
gone differently. Like that read,
Sure.
the read went very poor from Fro, and Kemmel just clicked Rock Slide.
Yeah.
But it could have swung in many different ways. The team this week that Fro brought, of course, I'm biased in this because I helped bring the six. We had thought of some pretty interesting strategies with like
Hmm.
the Flamigo, the Swagger Thunderous, stuff like that, the Rotom Heat. I think we said was going to be Scarf to KO the Pelipper. Uh,
Interesting. Okay, sure.
yeah, we had a couple like very interesting things, but I didn't get to help with like Terra's movesets, all that.
Hmm.
So I knew going into this, watching it, I'm like, something's going to be Terra Grass. You don't see a Lilligant and not bring something with Terra Grass.
Right.
And first thing we see is Terra Grass.
Yeah.
The Rain Dance on the Pelipper is, of course, pretty smart, but knowing that the Thunderous is probably going to be running Sunny Day, Kemmel prepped pretty well into this, and turn one. This just goes to show how fast a turn one read can absolutely swing the game.
Yeah, I mean, Kemmel legitimately, like, it's a rain team, but they just completely snowballed here, you know?
Yeah, and Fro, again, I do apologize for not helping prep more. Uh, but I will say there were some interesting strategies.
Sure, yeah.
Very,
I mean,
it just,
that's just true of Fro. Fro has one of the most unique and I would argue innovative teams that I've ever seen in a draft league. There's a lot of really fun and cool ideas going on there.
yeah,
It's just the question is, have they stretched themselves too thin?
yeah,
As there's a lot going on, but you can only accomplish so much. It's nice to have options, but when so much of your team is reliant on something to go right, you have to question whether or not it would have been better to just go for better generalist stuff.
yeah. I will say that team building with Fro was very fun. I was looking
Sure,
at,
I'm willing to believe that.
I was
Yeah.
looking at options, things like if the Lilligant had gone for a Quiver Dance,
Hmm.
something could have switched in the Swagger to boost the was it the Mirror Herb on the
Right,
Flamigo?
yeah, the Mirror Herb Flamingo, yeah.
While
It's a
also
fun idea. I will give that
yeah,
one.
the whole process was thinking of like fun ideas that could work if you get the reads right. Because I did say to Fro a couple times, both in the podcast and in our messages, that you have to play the team pretty offensively. That
Right.
maybe if the turn one went differently, the game could have gone differently.
Hmm.
But it's just it's the game we play. Really, I'm sorry
Yep.
to Fro that it ended up this way, but there are still a couple more games to play, and I did ask, and Fro is having some fun.
I'm glad to hear. But yes, the game, of course, did go to the Stockholm Sprigatitos with Kemmel. And with that, I think we should go on to the next game. And hey, what a coincidence, huh? You were just talking about how you've been helping Fro, and Mario Fan, MF, actually has come to me for help a bit since, we had the podcast episode talking about ways to help improve their team. And I'm proud to say that Mario Fan's team here, really solid.
It looks pretty solid. You want to tell us what it is?
Yeah, but first let's get into their opponent. Of course, we do have the Nottingham Nickets, coached by Mario Fan, but they were up against the Colorado Choodles, coached by Fred High. The Nottingham Nickets having Colossal, Raichu, Urshifu, Murkrow, Hisuian Typhlosion, and Rotom Mo.
With Fred bringing Shanpao, Abomasnow, Vaporeon, Gallade, Palmot, and Arcanine Hisuian.
Hmm.
And
And now, right off the
Frisk.
back,
Frisk is a pretty
yeah,
good ability, I will say.
Frisk is so good, yeah. I know I commented on how much I loved it. I think it was week 1 or 2, but it's such a good ability.
Yeah. I believe it was when Amelia was playing Robbie. You just,
Yes, that sounds right. Yes, I just started gushing about it.
yeah. And in this set, we do reveal that the Chin Pao was Assault Vest.
Right, yeah, there were some interesting things going on.
Yep, and the
But
Vaporeon. I don't think we've seen Vaporeon, but I don't think we've seen it on a team quite like this.
right. But so yeah, going into game one, the first few turns were spent, just fighting for positioning, as you do, both players trying to get their footing. Before Mario Fan was able to have Colossal and Hisuian Typhlosion get the double knockout on Chen Pao and Gallade, which put them really far ahead starting off. And something I want to mention is that Hisuian Typhlosion only took 43% from a Sword of Ruin boosted Shadow Sneak coming from Gallade. Now, granted, Shadow Sneak isn't a very strong move, but Gallade's still pretty physically powerful, and with Sword of Ruin boosting it, and it being super effective, that's pretty good.
It is, of course, not stab at this point,
It
but
isn't, no, but a
stab
lot of
sort of
things were
ruin
going
boosted,
for
sort of.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
After
Is
that,
it's not
Fred goes
boosted
for a
by
bit of a
sharpness, is it?
question. No, of course not.
Okay. There are some
Regardless.
really interesting moves boosted by sharpness.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things are just like translation things.
Yeah.
Why does
Population ball.
Doug Trio. Yeah, why does Doug Trio learn Sucker Punch? It doesn't have hands.
Yeah. Um, Getting back into
Regardless,
this,
yeah. After that, Fred goes for a bit of a questionable Terra. So they have Palma use Revival Blessing for Chen Pao, and after that, it tries to Terra Electric and spam Double Shock. However, when it does this, it's already at 1% having lived with its Sash, so it just dies and takes Terra with it.
I can see it
Really,
as a
if
desperation play,
but it didn't
but
really accomplish anything. It's not like the
no.
extra damage from the Terra Electric mattered, and it's not like being able to use Double Shock multiple times with the Terra Electric mattered, because it was just at 1%. Really, using the Terra at all on that Pokemon, unless it was absolutely needed to secure a KO that would just win you the game, it's just not the best play, because usually you want to get a lot of value out of your Terra. And using it on a Pokemon at 1%, it's not the best.
No, there's some situations where it comes up. I don't think that this one was one of them. And
Yeah.
I do actually think that this was a game where if the Palmot did more for Fred, that the Raichu could have done a fair bit for Mario Fan.
Hmm.
Uh, Double Shock being, of course, a very popular move on the Palmot. Raichu could have just come in, nabbed a free special attack boost.
This
Um,
is true, yeah.
I don't think it came up, but it is something interesting that could have come up.
Mhm. But for an example of getting good value from the Terra, I mean, just look at what Mario Fan did on their end. We see a really good defensive Terra from them. As Rotom was able to outspeed and Oko the Chenpao with Leaf Storm thanks to its Scarf, and with it going for Terra Fire, it was able to just cleanly live a Flare Blitz from the Hisuian Arcanine. Like that's the kind of thing you want to get from your Terra. That super high value play, being able to like get a strong KO and or being able to live an important hit, it matters, and it can be really, really powerful. It can absolutely just swing games.
Yeah, a ton of things can swing games, and a defensive Terra is definitely high up on that list.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was decided basically like day one that while yeah, offensive terrors do have some usage, it's very much so a defensive mechanic. Of course, it's a defensive mechanic that can be used in offensive ways. Use it to try and abuse your super strong physical attackers, or just otherwise high damage dealers even more. But again, it's a very defensive mechanic as it's panned out,
I,
which
I think
honestly is kind of neat.
I think I read somewhere that like if your attack or special attack is below 130, their Terra should be defensive or something like that.
Sure, sure.
It was like only if your attack is that high can you run an offensive Terra,
I don't know
which
if I agree with that number specifically, but like that vague
it,
idea, it's pretty true.
I was like 120, 130. It was just obnoxiously
Right.
high. And it was kind of funny to read that. And it does kind of make sense.
Yeah, and I
Pokemon
mean,
like
at
the
the same time
Urshifu.
though, yeah. But at the same time, even Pokemon with that high of a stat can still run defensive Terras. Think
Oh,
like
absolutely.
Fluttermane, for example. It usually runs like Terra Water or maybe Terra Steel.
Yeah. To be honest, even the Terra Fairy can be defensive, getting rid of your
True, yeah,
weakness
getting rid of the
to
ghost weakness. Getting rid of
opposing
ghost weakness,
Fluttermane.
making yeah, getting rid of ghost weakness, making darker resistance as opposed to neutral. It has some good usage.
Yep, you don't get hit by Sucker Punch as hard. You don't get hit by a opposing Fluttermane as hard.
Hmm.
And it's actually obnoxiously good on Flutter Main because you're just boosting your own Terra. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Fluttermane's just a big Terra abuser. We already know that.
Well, absolutely.
Regardless, getting back into it with game two, right off the bat, we saw a very thorough play from Mario Fan. I mean, so Obama Snow was up, right? And Mario Fan wanted to make sure that Aurora Veil was not going up no matter what. Not only did they target the Obama Snow with Urshifu's close combat to KO it, but also, just in case it was like Terra Ghost or even just Terra Water so that it wasn't weak to it, also had Murkrow set up Stun. Like, it was a great way to put on a ton of pressure. Like, the other Pokemon out was Vaporeon, which obviously is very passive, and making it so that its water moves do even less damage just made it so that it wasn't able to do a lot. It was just a really solid, aggressive turn one from Mario Fan.
Yeah, Mario Fan definitely played this game pretty offensively. Defensive Terra's helping out with that in the end.
Mm-hmm.
I do think prepping with Limevolt is definitely better than prepping with me, as shown.
I mostly kid with what I had said previous. You are obviously a very good builder. It's just that Fro's team is
It's so volatile.
yeah,
It
it's a
is
bit. I
so
think
volatile.
I think unwieldy is the term I will use. It like if you're able to get a grasp on it, if you're able to rein it in, it's terrifying. But it's
I,
really difficult to do that.
I did use it. I played with a couple friends, and I'm like, I'm going to use this team just to see how I do. And I did play a couple games with it.
Hmm.
I just didn't get to get back to Fro with what I had learned.
Right.
And I do think that was kind of what I was apologizing for. Like I did play some test games with it. It is a very fun team to play.
Oh,
Of
definitely. Yeah.
and it does get some actual success. You just need like that first turn to go right. If it doesn't go right, it's just such a volatile like turn one, turn two.
Hmm.
But you're the team that you help prep with doesn't quite. Of course,
Yeah, it's a
every
lot more straightforward, and it has a lot going for it. I mean,
turns are more important, are
yeah,
still
like
still important, but
yeah, like let's go back into it. I mean, speaking of turns being important, the next turn for MF just went perfect, right? Like Hisuian Arcanine on Fred's side spends Terra in order to try and resist Surging Strikes with Terra Water, but Marifan, sort of reading into this, just sort of immediately switches Urshifu out, bringing Hisuian Typhlosion in, and setting up Tailwind with the Murkrow, who then immediately dies, letting Rotom Mo also come in, putting Marifan in a terrifying position, especially since Muddy Water from the Vaporeon missed the Hisuian Typhlosion, so it was still at full health.
yeah, moves can miss, as
Mm-hmm.
we have seen before. And Vaporeon, it is still a Pokemon where if you're not, it is a bulky enough Pokemon that you can maybe afford to miss a move or two,
Mm-hmm.
but you still want to be hitting your moves, especially in doubles.
Right, right. But then a couple turns later, I will say not everything did go perfect for Mario Fan. There was one turn that was a bit iffy. So essentially, in this scenario, assuming Typhlosion's out, Chien-Pao's out. The Typhlosion Terra's out of its Dark weakness so that it can live a Sucker Punch, which it does. It lives at 2%, but it clicks Eruption, which makes you wonder if the Terra was worth it at all in that scenario, as just simply being able to keep the Terra for something else and accepting that the Hisuian Typhlosion is going to die may have actually just been better value than trying to spend Terra to preserve it, which, mind you, if it clicked anything other than Eruption, I wouldn't be making this comment. I would be saying it's great, it was a solid play, it gave the Hisuian Typhlosion another turn to do it at once, but because it did just click that Eruption, it just didn't end up working out. You know?
Yeah, eruption. Eruption is a really fun move. It's a really powerful move. Yeah, maybe not in every case.
Yeah, it has a lot of use cases. It has many use cases, but it isn't omnipotent. It is not universally the best option, which is something we definitely saw here.
Yeah, and imagine if Eruption and Water Spout just didn't have the HP.
Let's not.
Kairogi.
I don't want to think about Kyogre anymore. Regardless of that, Vaporeon does try and stall out a bit, but Typhlosion was able to just Oko the Chen Pao with Overheat after they clicked the Eruption, which again is good. Makes you question why they clicked Eruption in the first place, but it was good. but Vaporeon was just left on its own to deal with Mario Fan's onslaught, which
May-
just didn't really work out.
Maybe it was a misclick, to be honest.
It could have been, I suppose. I'm not going to discount that possibility. It happens to the best of us.
In the team builder, did you put the moves next to each other?
I do not recall, but it's possible.
Yep. And
Regardless, yeah, from there, as has pretty much been alluded to, Mario Fan did end up winning, which congrats to him. Of course, they did have some help from me, but anyone in the server is always free to ask for help from anyone. It's always encouraged. This is meant to be a community thing, and it's nice to see someone who, like I mentioned, got off to a bit of a rocky start, has been able to make such a comeback since then.
where is is he a 2 and 3?
Mario Fan at the moment he is currently a 2-3, yes, which again, lost the
Still in
first
the
three
race.
weeks. Yeah, since then has won both their matches. They went 0-3, didn't go 0-4. It's now legitimately possible for them to make playoffs if they keep this up. It's going to be hard, it's going to be arduous, but it's not impossible, which is crazy to think about.
We have only had one team not win a single set,
Right.
and
And
I
even
think
then, they've
that's
had several sets which have been pretty close, and it's been very possible that they could have won.
and I don't think there was there were not a lot of they didn't have a lot of 0 and 2s, which is pretty impressive.
Right, yeah. hmm But I
But
mean, hey, why don't we just go ahead and not beat around the bush? Let's go right into this player. This player, of course, being Valorn, the coach of the Children of Arceus. And they were,
first,
of course, against Ian, the coach of the Golden Goomies.
yeah, with Ian bringing Electros, Tinkaton, Amoonguss, Bombardier, Chestnut, and Arcanine.
Yep. And then on Valorn's side, there was the Volcarona, the Corviknight, the Iron Treads, the Chansey, the Umbreon, and the Hydreigon.
Yeah, I might have a nice talk with Valorn soon. They're
We're gonna have to remind them to make sure that the team builder is set to Regulation E and not Gen 9 OU. But
um they don't really make a lot of use out of this Chansey in this set. We see right away Volcarona's out, Volcarona's gone.
Yeah, I mean, both sides were at least able to set up Tailwind, but afterwards, I mean, what can be said? Bombardier just immediately KOs the Volcarona, who just goes for a really greedy Quiver Dance. And speaking of questionable things from Valorn's side, Iron Treads. Don't get me wrong, it's a good Pokemon. This Iron Treads is mixed. It ran Earth Power. And I'm not entirely sure why, because I'm pretty confident it has a perfectly usable single target ground move.
Uh, I believe it just gets high horsepower.
Yeah, it has high horsepower, so the Earth Power is. I don't know what to think of it.
It might have been reading something like more what
Yeah,
um
I can't even think of anything it could be reading. And even if you were to believe that, at that point, just go all in and go special Iron Treads. I'm not saying it's good, but if that's the read you're going for and that's what you think the answer is, go for it. Try it.
I was gonna
Experiment.
I was gonna say maybe they were trying to play like around Intimidate on Arcanine, run a special option.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're
Um,
that scared of Intimidate, you could just run something like Clear Amulet.
yeah, and
Yeah, it didn't work out.
Chansey, it gets off Stealth Rocks, I believe. It gets off of Stealth Rocks.
That happens in game 2, yes.
Yeah, these games just they go really quickly, to be honest, in Ian's
Yes.
favor. Maybe it was a lack of
I will
prep.
say,
It could have
I
been
will say one funny thing we did get to see in game 1 is the Arcanine does try and Will-O-Wisp Umbreon, but because the Arcanine is Terrid into normal, for extreme speed shenanigans, all that stuff, because the Arcanine's not a fire type, Umbreon Synchronize is
a.
actually able to trigger and burn the Arcanine back. Which an Arcanine being burnt is not something you see very often.
No, that is absolutely not something you see very often.
Yeah,
Um,
at the very least, Valen they try to take some advantage, right? They get Talon back up, okay, on the Arcanine, and they leave Chestnut on life support. But
it
Umbreon just desperately tries to hang on against Ian as it goes for Wish Protect stalls
it could have been a
as
lack
well.
of prep, to be honest, going
It,
into.
it, it could have, but the
I'm,
play itself is just
I'm thinking
I
that
don't know what to
first
think of
turn,
it.
when I first saw
Hmm.
Bombardier, I did not know at all what it did. And
Sure.
even seeing Rocky Payload, I was like, is that really good? Because I was thinking about prepping it or drafting it last season when I played. I, of course, dropped pretty early on because of external issues. But Bombardier was something I was thinking about drafting, and even I was sitting there. I looked into it and still barely knew what it did. Valorn,
Sure.
absolutely. You see Flying Dark, if it runs a rock type move, you might not think it's going to be a rock type move boosted by an ability.
Yeah, essentially, it's a rock type as well, and it stabs.
Yeah, it's really actually it's interesting. We've seen a little bit with Delmise in previous generations. It's
Hmm.
effectively steel type as well with their stab moves. You don't
Hmm.
see Bombardier nearly as much, and I'm not even going to say you see Delmise a lot.
Right, right.
Rocky
I will give it
Payload,
to you. Yeah, there are some unorthodox things here. I don't mean to say everything is like clear cut. It's just Valorn. I I don't know what to think. I'll be entirely honest. Like they
'cause
have some solid options on their team, right?
I'm
It's
going to
just that
say,
they aren't willing to lean into a lot of them. It seems.
really, absolutely, yeah. I will say, if the Bombardier did not get that Stone Edge off, and this was
Hmm.
Stone Edge, not Rock Slide, mind
This
everyone.
is true. Yeah.
Um, the Quiver Dance on the Volcarona could have done some work because
Sure.
if
Yeah.
you look at the rest of the team, it could have been just not knowing that Bombardier runs Rock type moves because of its ability.
Hmm.
You see Arcanine, you see Tinkaton, you see or not Arcanine, the Amoonguss, Chestnut. That's two grass types and a steel type. Quiver Dance
Hmm.
does a nice chunk into those. Or
Right.
Heat Wave, Flamethrower, and even it could Terra out of its into say water type. That now it has great hits into the Arcanine. Quiver Dance, Terra Blast into the Bombardier could have been huge. So it might have just been not knowing what Bombardier did that did Valorn in the early turns, I'll say. Later
Right.
on,
In
we
the
do.
early turns, I can see that. After that, there's only so much you can do. As I
Yeah,
was mentioning, like Umbreon desperately tried to hang on against Ian as it just went for Wish Protect stalls, but this ends up working against Ian, as spending so much time trying to keep the Umbreon alive meant that it wasn't actually doing anything, and the battle turned into a 2v1 because of that. Like,
yeah.
the Umbreon was just accomplishing nothing, and because of that, Valen wasn't able to get anything done, and he just gets. I mean, he tries to outlast Ian, but he can't outdamage him. He can't do anything.
Is
And
this
as was
another
mentioned,
game where we see the Eviolite get knocked off of the Chansey?
I do not recall.
I don't think so, but running Chansey without as much support as Valen did against something like the Chestnut, good luck.
Yeah,
If
but I mean,
you,
yeah. Going next to game two, just to continue on,
of course,
because like the Chansey, of course, comes up and it runs Stealth Rocks, which it's a great move in singles. It's not quite at home in doubles, and it seems like a lot of the play from Valorant just comes from inexperience, which is completely fine, right? Like it's okay to not be the most familiar with something. We're here to have fun. We're here to try and help people learn, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mean to talk down to Valorant at all, and I apologize if any tone felt like that's what's going on.
I will say Stealth Rocks being set out turn one is definitely a lot better than we've seen from Valorant.
Right. It's
Uh,
not like
it
terrible.
it does 25%. If Arcanine keeps trying to switch around, it does 25% to the Bombardier because it is flying type and not rock type by nature.
Right. Like
Um,
Stealth Rock does have some utility here. It's
it
just
can,
not the best option.
of course, it's definitely not the best. It's when I played it, it was funny because the rest of my team could play around it.
Sure.
In a composition like this, if you're going to bring Chansey, it's maybe better off as cleric support
Hmm.
running life. I believe we did see life do on it.
Yeah, things like Life Do, things like Thunder Wave, maybe even Seismic Toss for damage, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, seismic toss is basic. If you're seismic toss should basically be your only attacking move.
Hmm.
Uh, and healer is definitely a great ability with a
Yeah,
33, is it either 30 or 33% chance to
it's something like
heal
that. Yeah.
thunder waves off of Electros, maybe Tinkaton if it gets it, burns off of the Arcanine. It
Hmm.
is, and of course, Life Do, even of course, just running the combination of Heal Pulse and Soft Boiled for extra like support being healing your ally for more or just healing yourself if the end game comes to that. But the Chansey running Stealth Rocks and not doing much else, it did get some Seismic Tosses out, but
Yeah.
it didn't do the cleric support that a Chansey on this sort of team should do.
Right. And really just like Valorant felt a bit out of their element this game. Like I will say this was a bit of a funny mistake on both ends. Ian mistakenly clicks Tailwind as it's already set up. As Valorant, I believe the same turn even, reclicks Stealth Rocks, which have already been set up. I don't know,
Stealth
maybe
Rocks
they
do
were
not spec.
anticipating defog? I don't know.
No.
Uh, it,
Maybe they thought Stealth Rocks could
it
stack
very
like
it,
spikes.
yeah. I think it's either they forgot they were up or it was just an honest mistake.
Maybe,
Regardless of that, though,
I think it might have been
Volcarona
more.
tries to go for another really greedy quiver dance in front of Bombardier,
Yeah,
who is able to just KO it as Among Us puts the partner to sleep. And from there, I mean, it's the repeat of game one, right? Like Umbreon is able to hang on for a while thanks to Life Dew from Chansey and the wishes, but again, it isn't actually accomplishing anything which advances their game. It's like Valen was playing as if Ian's whole team was toxic. Really, like they were so set to try and stall that they just completely neglected doing damage at all. And so Ian was able to just win both games pretty much without any contention, really.
and they did play a third game for fun that also went to Ian.
Yes. Regardless though. Um
Uh,
Valorn,
this
it's an
was
unfortunate record. We hope you're at least enjoying yourself.
yep,
If you ever want to talk to anyone, let us know. We're always available to try and help people.
yep.
And if you don't
Valorant,
want to and you're content just playing for fun, hey, good on you. God, I wish I could just do that.
Valorant is our sole 0-5 player of the league,
Hmm.
which I won't say this as anything harmful to them. As the only player to have not won a single game, everyone else having won at least one, I do think that's good for everybody. This is a pretty balanced league, I will say. As I
Sure, yeah. I mean, if we want to look at the league itself, right, there's very few people who are like extremely dominant or like otherwise, really far behind. Like, genuinely, the league has been pretty balanced all around, I will say.
Yep. Of course, this is only 8 rounds, and we're in the fifth. But we have 4 people at a 4-1 record, multiple people at 3-2, and then just the list. There aren't a lot of 1-4s either.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
really, like, genuinely, I'm starting to feel like the Swiss pairings have really paired off, as there's only a single 5-0 and there's only a single 0-5. Like, everything has been pretty even all around, really.
we do, of course, have 1-4s and 4-1s, but that comes with the
That's
draft
to be
and the fact that
expected, yeah.
someone has to win and someone has to lose.
Exactly.
Um, and of course,
Regardless.
luck is always a factor in these games, as well as
Also
maybe
true,
just
yes.
bad turns. That does not have to affect how you play in this tournament. It is, of course, for fun at the end of the day. And I do
Hmm.
hope that everybody in the league is having as much fun as I am watching these battles play out.
I agree. It's been great.
Going
Regardless.
into our
Yes,
next
let's go into the
game,
next one.
we have
Three
the
left.
yep Dancing Dragonites versus Spike Myth Sylveons, with the Dragonites being coached by Tenacity and the Spike Myth Sylveons being coached by Sky, with Sky bringing Iron Hands, Gengar, Gyarados, Shiny Gyarados, Gardevoir, Venomoth, and Fletchling.
Yep, on the other side we do have the Dancing Dragonites with the Fluttermane, Gotharita, Hariyama, Gastrodon, Iron Jugulus, and Typhlosion.
And I think this is the game where I have the most notes.
I feel free, go ahead then.
So I do think that Sky goes for early Dragon Dances with the Gyarados, um, but Sky goes for I think it was three of them, which I think is a turn too heavy, as
I
three of them
agree, yes.
they don't even two shots. Of course, it doesn't one shot the Gotharita, which if three of them OHKO'd but two of them didn't, I could see maybe pushing it. But if two of them were to OHKO and as well, just going for the third Dragonets, I think was very greedy as the Gyarados just it got super heavily damaged as it was
Yeah,
trying to set these Dragon Dances up.
I completely agree. And I mean, to be fair, it was able to successfully set those three Dragon Dances up, right? Like, the Pokemon that were out on Tenacity's side were a bit passive, especially thanks to the Fletchling, which was just throwing out taunts against them. It really slowed them down. But yeah, as was mentioned, the third just proves to be a bit too greedy, as the damage Gyarados takes while trying to set it up makes so that it can only actually get one KO before it's knocked out in return.
Yep.
Just 1 to 2D dances would have likely proven to be much more effective, but instead, Sky tries to just grab every single cookie in the jar and gets her hand stuck.
I do believe the thing with Sky was the Gyarados was I think at almost full health when it was at two Dragon Dances, so I think Sky was like trying to be more comfortable getting that third dance up.
Maybe, but
Unfortunately,
at the same time, like, you see a +2 Gyarados, especially one that's under Tailwind as well, anyone's going to target into that thing, so you kind of have to expect that.
yeah, that third Dragon Dance
maybe
was I think just very
Maybe
greedy.
she was trying to read the opponent reading into a protect? That's my best guess there.
I feel like it's more you see Gyarados at full health, or you see your Gyarados is at
Sure,
full
sure.
health, so you feel like you can just go for it. It might have also just been not knowing that three of them would not get the KO on the Gotharita.
Maybe, maybe.
Maybe Sky thought being at uh plus that plus three
Mhm.
would KO.
Maybe. Regardless, following that, Tenacity, they do get a really good turn as is able to read a double into Typhlosion and get Gengar down to 3% with the two Pokemon both dying the following turn. And after that, in what I have to assume had to have been an intentional calc. There's no way this was luck. This had to be intentional. Fluttermane was able to live Iron Hand's Wild Charge at 4%, as it was then able to just do a ton of damage in return. It and the Gastro doing 76% to the hands.
Unfortunately, throughout this set, we did not see how much a Fletchling would do to Hariyama.
Yes, 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 but that's already been set in the record books. It
Um,
happened once, it doesn't need to happen twice. We already know.
yep. This game did go very back and forth after the opening turns,
Mhm.
and Sky did lose this battle, only lost it by 2%.
Yeah, I mean, the end game was Fletchling versus Gastrodon, as Fletchling was able to pick up some really good KOs, notably, one of them being that Fluttermane who was left at 4%. But in the end game, yeah, of course, between Fletchling and Gastrodon, of the silly slug wins, right? I will say though, it does require it to stall a bit with Protect in order to get leftovers recovery. And as you mentioned, it barely did live, but it did end up going in T's favor in the end.
Yep. A single damage roll, a single crit, even if taunt on the Gastrodon were a turn longer,
Hmm.
it would have
Yeah, a
gone
lot of
into
things
Sky's
could have,
favor.
yeah, right. A lot of things could have gone in Sky's favor that game. It's just T ended up taking it.
Yep. Going into game two, we see the Gardevoir tracing Flash Fire.
Yes. Hmm.
Trace is always a very interesting move or
Yep.
ability, and it could effectively do nothing with two Paradox and a Ruinous Pokemon, or
Hmm.
it could take a Flash Fire.
Yes.
And we
But yeah,
do
I mean,
see. the
Sorry,
Flashfire
go ahead.
comes in
Mhm.
as Tenacity brings the Typhlosion going for Eruption, which
Yep.
Flashfire is immune to.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, like in game two, right? Like right away, we saw some really good stuff on Sky's End, right? Fletchling goes into Ghost type to make sure it's immune to Fake Out. Um, Gardevoir is able to just try and fire stuff off. Overall, it was pretty solid. Like Tenacity tries to Terra their Gothorita so that it's able to live longer, but it just gets taunted. Like Sky just played solidly this game. Overall, it was really nice.
yep, Sky was throwing around taunts, and they were just doing amazing. Tenacity brought a somewhat slower team. I won't
Right.
say it's incredibly slow. It's very, very good offensive options. But
Mhm.
if you get a taunt down early, maybe onto the Jugless, you could deny Tailwind. Onto the Slug, you deny half its moveset. And onto Gothorita, you deny everything that makes it good.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I will say T does make a questionable play as after, the whole thing had happened with Gothorita going into Terra Dark to try and, resist Gengar's Ghost Stab, but before it gets taunted, right? They start firing Psychics into the Fletchling for the next 3 turns. Which, if he had
Yikes.
just simply doubled into the Gengar, he would have gotten the KO. But because of the time Sky got from him just trying over and over to get rid of this Fletchling, she was able to reposition. Gyarados got set up with the Dragon Dance alongside Iron Hands, and they were able to just clean up the game, bringing us to game three.
To be fair, this Fletchling was being a menace, but
It
investing
was being annoying, but it
three
feels like it was
turns.
using. Yeah, it felt like it was using taunt less on Gothorita and more on T himself. This bird was pissing him off.
That could have just been it.
He he wanted this bird dead.
That bird did not want that around. Um,
Yes.
yeah. I we did not notice or did not note actually that the we saw very early terras coming out from both sides, I think. One of
Yeah, no,
which
this
being
was noted. Yeah.
Terra on the Jugulus, and well, it didn't get to do what it really wanted to do with that Terra.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, going into game three, right? Like another set of turn one defensive terrors. Gardevoir goes into dark for Typhlosion's Shadow Ball, and T goes into poison on the Jugulus for Gardevoir's Moonblast. But both sides elect to just simply set up Tailwind. Meanwhile, the Sky has Gardevoir go for Mystical Fire instead of Moonblast into the Jugulus just to try and debuff it.
Or
As was
maybe
mentioned
reading
earlier,
into the Terra.
it's also possible. Yeah, it might have been a read. Fair enough. But yeah, as was mentioned earlier, Flashfire on the Gardevoir, thanks to Trace, made it so that the sun boosted eruption from Typhlosion wasn't actually able to accomplish much.
Yep. Going into game three, it didn't really have a lot of it had a lot more swing turns really, with a lot of damage going in both directions. Uh there were of course some very good plays on both ends, and it all came down really to the Jugulus and the Hariyama, which is kind of funny to see.
True, but something I do want to say is that really, I think game three, turn six, is where everything sort of like fell apart for Sky. Like she was set up super well. She had Gyarados with a Dragon Dance, Gardevoir was still at full health, and she was facing down Hariyama and Flutter. But in this scenario, she, instead of putting on pressure, elects to just go for a really greedy Dragon Dance instead of doing damage with the Gyarados. And as well,
Yeah.
she Mystical Fires the Flutter Mane instead of just Moonblasting Hariyama. And since the Gardevoir, as we mentioned, was terrored into Dark, Hariyama was able to just Drain Punch it and Oko it. Really, if Sky had played this turn differently, it's possible she would have won the whole set, but this turn alone just completely swung everything in T's favor.
Yep. And I will say this game ended up again very close. The Hariyama, I think, ended up within 10%
Yeah,
from
it ended at 8%.
yep, from the Iron Hands Wild Charge. Unfortunately, close combat from the Hariyama just could do more damage,
Right.
taking out the Iron Hands and giving
Mhm.
Tenacity the 2-1 victory over
Yeah.
Sky. And
Overall, yeah. If Sky had slightly better target in that game three, and if like that turn six play had gone differently, she totally could have had it. But at the same time, T played well. He pivoted well. He played it into his outs. So I would still, without a doubt, say the victory was completely earned. Both
I,
players did play very well. There was just a bit of a fumbling there.
I do think these games would have gone differently if Sky wasn't just so greedy with
Mm-hmm.
the dragon dances.
True.
Every time that a greedy dragon dance would come out, any other play would have maybe just pushed damage so far into Sky's favor.
Right.
But going for that extra dragon dance just put too much damage on Sky's Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps even just KOing Sky's Pokemon, and that's just not the game you want to really play.
Right.
And I do want
But
to say before we go into the next game, I know our showdowns are probably different, but it's kind of fitting with Sky. All of her Pokemon that could have genders are female on my screen.
I believe that is just how it works with the replays. It's that it's going to be the same as it was in the match. But I
Yep.
mean, hey, what a segue. If we want to talk about an all female team, let's go into the next match where there is an all female team on the side of the saucy Spidops coached by Jay.
Oh, I see all
How
females too.
poetic. How poetic.
Oh,
Can't make an omelet without cracking a few way. I mean, regardless, yes, it is the
this is
saucy Spidops versus the hardened Metapods, the latter of which being coached by Sour.
yep, with Sour bringing Dundozo, Tatsugiri, Mischievous, Sneasel, Urshifu, and Flamigo.
Mm-hmm. And the matriarch of the Saucy Spidops being Slowpoke, Salazzle, no, sorry, not Slowpoke, Slowbro, Salazzle, Baxcalibur, Queen Gambit, Meowscarada, and Sylveon.
The Queen's Gambit.
Yo, I love Netflix.
Yo.
Chess is
We
so cool.
Yep,
Anyways,
that's why we play it
uh,
on Showdown. We
so yeah,
do see uh
turn one, we see really solid play just overall from Jay. Actually doing something very similar to what I did in my game, actually. So the Sneasel is inner focus, and not wanting to risk a focus sash letting it lives, Jay just clicks fake out into it so that it can then just be KO'd by a double from Meowscarada. So, so that's a little fun, a little bit of solidarity there. Clicking focus sash, it's not focus sash, clicking fake out into the flinch immune Pokemon just to break a focus sash.
yep, hey Lime.
hmm
What was Tatsugiri's ability this game?
Yes. After the Sneasel dies, Sour goes for a really good play, switching the Urshifu out of danger and setting up Dozogiri for the first time. We actually finally saw it. The first 4 weeks were prep. Now it's game time, baby. We have Commander Tatsugiri. Oh,
Unfortunately,
yeah. I mean, to be
uh,
fair, right? Like, the Dozo does tear into fire so that Meowscarada can't threaten it, and Salazzle fails to burn it. Like, that turn goes really well, all things considered, I will
yep,
say.
this Danzozo does get a lot of good turns right, but it also just doesn't. The thing with Dundozo is you are playing the 2v1, which naturally
Yes.
you get an Omniboost, that's great, but
A
it
double Omniboost at that.
it doesn't get to keep its attack stat via Slowbro having chilly water.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Salazzle just causes the Dondozo to get encored into a resisted Terra Blast, and Slowpoke, or sorry, I wrote Slowpoke in my notes, that's why I said it.
Oh,
Slowbro just starts going for Chilling Water to neutralize the Dozo, and
did you
a few
trade your
turns
Slowpoke to him?
later. No. A few turns later, even though Sylveon does end up taking a lot of damage, Jay was actually able to get rid of the Dozo while also having Trick Room turns remaining. And with that, Sylveon was able to just clean up the game.
Yeah, the Dundozo part of it was the chilling water from the Slowbro not being able to let it keep its
Oh,
attack stat.
genuinely, yeah.
It
I think the
just
Slowbro put in a ton of work
Oh,
here.
it put in absolute truckloads. The thing with Dundozo, of course, is it's a 2v1. You get the double Omni Boost, but you
hmm
can only hit one thing at a time, usually.
Yeah.
And in this case, it just couldn't do enough with the turns that it had, so it just slowly got whittled down. Uh, um, with it not being able to do as much damage. it just kept getting hit, and it was not any sort of rest set. So it just kept getting chipped, kept getting chipped, and finally it went down.
Hmm. Yeah, so game one does go to Jay, and right off the bat, just like heading straight into game two, right?
Hmm.
The Tatsugiri terras, and it tries to KO the Meowscarada, but it does live, and the Mischievous goes down from a double up. Jay is able to start spreading around statuses, having Wisp and Yawn, all that. And they do get up Trick Room. And so, things are going in Jay's favor, right? Like, they're definitely in a winning position here. But of course, Tatsugiri and Dondozo, it's actually Commander. You have to find a way to out it. Um, so how do you deal with Dondozo?
Yawn.
No, Yawn's a way to slow it down, but that's not a way to break it.
Ooh, how about a glaive rush actually?
How about a Glaive Rush that's gonna crit thanks to Focus Energy Baxcalibur? What? Talk about a fucking out, man. The shit you see in Draft League.
Yeah, we see it crit through all of the boosts.
Yeah,
Glaive
it
rush.
crits through all the boosts. It Terra Fairies to make it so that Flamigo can't even do anything. And then, I mean, afterwards, Helping Hand boost, Glaive Rush goes through Dozo, and from there, Bax just was unstoppable and cleans through the entirety of Sour's team.
Yep. Did
Oh
we
my
see all four
goodness.
of Dondozo's moves in this set? I actually don't know offhand.
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I mean, game two, we didn't get to see it try anything because of Focus Energy Back's caliber.
I was going to say we didn't see any rest set, and I think if it had Earthquake, it could have done a lot. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't know what the four moves were. Of
Sure.
course, we saw one of them was Terra Blast, and
Hmm. Yeah, it's
maybe
true.
if
It just didn't get to click a lot of moves in general because that Encore stopping in game one as well.
yeah, maybe if it was a different set, it could have done more work. So this just could
Maybe.
have been like the wrong four moves on this. But
Sure.
like game one, some sort of rest set could have done a ton of work. Game two, maybe not letting the if it had order up, it could have dealt with Excalibur maybe.
Hmm.
But I don't know with not knowing all four of the moves what set it was running, so it just couldn't really do the work that Dondozo is known to do, especially with the commander boost being shown off for the first time this league.
Hmm.
This set does go pretty convincingly to Jay, and they saw us a Spite Ops in a 2-0 fashion,
Yes.
and
And
that
that
leads
brings
us.
us to the last match of the night. The Southampton Smug Leafs, coached by Jamie Boyd, versus the Miami Heat Trans, coached by Nine. Now,
Ours.
reminder, at this point, these are the two undefeateds left in the league.
Yep, this was the scariest game, and it was featured on cartridge too. The
Yes,
cinematics.
there is a video for this on Jamie Boyd's channel. There's
Yep,
also a video for the first match. I believe it was one of, if not the first matches of the night. Reckless Trico's game, of course, also on their channel as well. Links in the
yep,
description.
both linked. Yep, of course. Stealing my thunder. And we see
Regardless, yes.
the Miami Heatrans bringing Moltres Galler, Slowking Galler, Heatran, Quaquival, uh, what is that? It's Brute Bonnet, and a personal favorite, Zangoose.
Yep, and then on the Southampton Smugleaf side, we do have Baxcalibur again, Iron Thorns, Kilowattrel, Crocodile, Slitherwing, and Venonat.
Yep, we do see Venonat for the first time coming from Boyd, I believe. The Venonat being shiny, which was cool. And I don't think this bag's color was focus energy.
It was not. It was actually loaded dice, which is something we saw immediately getting into game one, as Brute Bonnet chose Yachi Berry to try and live an ice move from the Baxcalibur. Unfortunately, because of the nature of multi-hit moves, the Yachi Berry was only able to reduce the damage of one Icicle Spear, but at the very least,
it did let it live thanks to that difference, and it was able to spore the Venonat. So it does work out, even if it didn't get the max value it wanted out of the Yachi Berry.
To be fair, the Icicle Spear coming from the Baxcalibur was only 4 hits. If it were five,
This is true,
it
yes.
might have taken that KO, or
Right.
if it didn't leave the Brute Bonnet on practically 1 HP.
Mm-hmm. Very
But
true.
it did get the early Spore off, which honestly, that was a read that I did not think was going to happen. I thought it was just going to um I thought 9 was just going to try to get that Trick Room up turn 1.
Mm-hmm.
We did
That's
not
fair.
see that happening. We saw a Protect coming out from the Slowbro?
Yeah.
Slowbro.
The Glow Bro. Or the Glow King, I mean. Sorry.
Slow King, my bad.
We're just getting this family's name wrong constantly this week. I guess it's a theme. Put it in the title. I don't
Yeah.
care.
See, we're not on Showdown, so I can't just hover over it.
Right, right. Regardless, yeah. I mean, following that up, next turn, the Glow King is able to set up the Trick Room as Nine sends out Zangoose, and Crocodile pivots in to intimidate, showing that Jamie Boyd was actually respecting the Zangoose, and rightfully so. As even with that, the Crook switches back into Baxcalibur, and despite being intimidated, Zangoose just deletes it with close combat.
Yep. This before the Brute Bonnet goes down, it gets a Sucker Punch into the um Baxcalibur. And I don't know if it was with that damage or just Zangoose being toxic procs. It just does that much, but the close combat just deletes that Baxcalibur, which was a really good play either way. Crocodile either takes a bunch or dies, or Baxcalibur switches in and dies.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, Jamie just can't really do too much. Tries to take it back with the Crocodile, getting some more Intimidates down, but the Zangoose just switches out.
Mm-hmm.
And we do see the Flamethrower get the burn on the Iron Thorns. Was it
Right,
Iron
right, yeah.
Thorns? Iron Thorns right
I think.
before right before it dies, which was just
Right. I
BM
mean,
from
yeah.
9.
Yeah, I mean, like game one, like the Thorns, it was fairly late in the game, but the Thorns does, commit the Terra as it tries to go for a D dance. But the Quaquaval was just able to outspeed it after an Aqua Step. And, I mean,
Yep, Aqua Step does go into the Crocodile, which gives it the Moxie boost as well.
yeah, it just takes 2 KOs, leaving the Thorns alone. And from there, Nine was able to just clean up the game.
Yep. Going into game 2, we see Terra Steel coming from the Moltres, but it goes
Mm-hmm.
for Taunt onto the Venonat.
Yes, which I mean, honestly, very smart play. We saw from the damage rolls last game that Nine could confirm that it was Eviolite as opposed to something like Mental Herb. So it makes sense wanting to taunt it, just make it basically a 2v1. And then also, we saw Glow King go for a focused blast into the Baxcalibur, which did, I think, around like 60 to 70%. It was good.
I watched this video from Jamie's side, and he
Mm-hmm.
shouted when Focus Blast came out.
Yeah, he was not expecting it.
Nope. It also is to note the Venonat. This is Jamie Boyd we're talking about, the champion of using the Eviolite, and was talking about it in the server, in his prep video, about just how good this Venonat with an Eviolite is.
How good it is in the context of it being an E tier, I think was the point trying to be made.
Yep, he I believe stated that it was a huge mistake for it to be an E tier.
Which I can understand that point. I think, in retrospect, I could very easily see us putting it in D, maybe C tier. But I still
I
disagree with the
think
comment he initially made comparing it to Fungus.
I think
The
C
Fungus is
tier is a
so much
little too
better than
high.
this thing. Yeah. Regardless, E tier definitely was a bit low for this thing. That was something we missed. I'll admit that. But regardless,
And
after the
he's
Focus Blast goes into the Baxcalibur, I mean, Boyd just sort of takes control of the game, right? Like, the Baxcalibur was able to KO the Goltress, who teared into steel.
It was a
Venonat's
stomping
taunt
tantrum
runs out. Yeah, I believe so, yes. The I'm trying to recall.
from the Bex caliber.
Right. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, it was Simon Tantrum as Glow King resets Trick Room. Um, Eventually the Baxcalibur does die, but Venonat's taunt runs out. Jamie Boyd, he just does a good job stalling out Trick Room, and he just leaves the tools he needs in the back. Like, he isn't trying to rush the game. He's willing to play a bit slower when he needs to, and it gave him what he needed to win game 2.
Yep, Trick Room goes down at the exact wrong time for 9, as
Mm-hmm.
Jamie just gets to outspeed and clean up. Has
Yes.
all the tools, has all the speed,
Mm-hmm.
and just takes the game almost pretty convincingly. Just as you said,
I'd say so, yeah.
slowed down
Mm-hmm.
when he needed to, just made very good plays. Of course, got surprised by things like the focus blast and the taunt, but just played around them.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
And then going into game 3, we see the Venonat takes the Terra. Nope. The Quaquaval takes Terra to KO the Venonats. But we also
Yeah. I mean,
see a Terra burned to KO the Quaquaval.
right, yeah. I mean, both sides immediately terrored. The Venom and the Quaquaval both die. 9 gets up Trick Room, but the terrored Excalibur is full health as well. And Intimidate into the Zangoose also does hurt 9. Like, at this point, Trick Room is up, but Jamie is in a very strong spot. 9 gets a really good turn, correctly pivoting Heatran into First Impression from the Slitherwing.
Which was huge, really.
Yeah, like that was a big turn, and it really did allow 9 to take charge. With a few Trick Room turns left, 9 was really able to make the most of it, doing huge damage to Boyd's whole team as just, again, solid play from both sides. But Heatran under Trick Room, as we've said before, it's Heatran under Trick Room. It was able to KO both the Slitherwing and the Baxcalibur, which ended up leaving Crocodile alone and unable to deal with the rest of 9's team. Like, Game 3, borderline felt like a sweep. It was just it was a training video on why you need to respect Heatran, pretty much.
Yep, Jamie actually said in his video that there was basically nothing that could switch into. This was booster energy into attack
Yes, with
Slitherwing.
the Slitherwing. Yeah,
So that first impression, basically nothing on Nine's team could take it except for the Heatran.
exactly.
Something like the Quackable, it was dead, of course.
Yeah, it was dead at that point,
That might
and
be the
everything
only other
else.
thing.
Yeah, there just wasn't anything I could do. They didn't have any other resists on the team. Brute Bonnet is 4 times weak,
Yep. So
but
Jamie
then
makes a point of
Heatran just
mentioning that
yeah,
Heatran would probably be the worst switch in. And well,
and
Heatran
hey,
switches.
ask and you shall receive.
Yep. Heatran comes in and uh, 9 does also make a pretty nice read, flamethrowing into a what was at the end of the game?
At the end of the
From
game, it was the
Crocodile
Crocodile. That was a lot.
into the
Yes,
Baxcalibur.
right, right.
Flamethrowers the Baxcalibur, gets the double heat wave, just takes that game.
Yeah.
Um,
9 was able to win, beating, of course, Mr. Jamie Boyd and
VGC superstar
securing
himself.
mhm, and securing herself as the current only person left who is undefeated at a 5-0 record. And if I'm not mistaken, um, 2, maybe 3 out of the 4 people that are 4-1 have only lost to 9.
There
I'm
was
unsure who Unova lost to, and the only other person is Nilly, who I beat in week 1. Which also, shout out Nilly. Lost week 1, but has gone 4-0 since then. Good shit. Nilly's been playing well.
Nilly lost to you, and your only loss was to 9. 9 going undefeated. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. As well, because of the way it works out, the only people left that were 4-1, like, essentially what we're trying to say is that regardless of who won between 9 and Boyd, 9 was always going to be facing Nilly next because they were the only person left who was 4-1 that they hadn't faced, if I recall correctly.
So 9 did face
I think so, yes. I
I think
believe that is the case.
yes, because tries to use the competitive skill swap again, but 9 just tears right into a resist and takes the KO
That's right.
on immediately.
Yes,
So
right. So out of there's one person who's 5-0, that's 9, and then there are 4 people who are 4-1, 3 of those lost to 9. One of them lost to me. And of course,
Who
that
lost to
last
9?
person is facing 9. Well, hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Week 6 hasn't happened yet.
No, you lost to 9. That's what I was saying.
Oh, I see. That's what you're saying. Hey, sure. I mean, hey, who knows? Maybe rock, paper, scissors, Nilly's going to be the person to dethrone 9. We'll see. Week 6 is coming soon, everybody. And by soon, I mean, it's told this is not being recorded on a Thursday. I don't know what you're talking about.
Nope, one of your hosts was not sick, and the recording is not going up late.
Nope.
What is Nelly's team? The King Gambits?
Yeah, the Kill Team King Gambits, yes.
Iron Hands Pincurchin.
Regardless.
Do you think this is when he brings Pincurchin?
Please don't. Regardless, I think this is a pretty solid place to end it. I'm really looking forward to week 6. I'm really looking forward to seeing what everyone does. And oh god, I'm terrified. I'm facing Jamie Boyd next. I'm not looking forward to this.
Good luck. Have fun too, Lime.
Yep. See ya, everybody.
Have a good week and good luck.